You've been tricked into thinking being behind means you're failing. They told you life has deadlines, that if you don't hit the right age, the right money, the right status, then something is wrong with you. But if that were true, why do so many people who look ahead still feel lost? Why do so many people who made it still wake up heavy, still feel empty, still feel like they're running without arriving? The truth is, you are not behind. You are just comparing your real life to an imagined timeline, and that timeline was never yours to carry. Buddhist wisdom has been exposing this illusion for thousands of years. It teaches that life is not a straight line, it is an unfolding. It moves in seasons, it moves in cycles, it moves in waves, and patience is not waiting, it is power. It is the calm strength to keep moving without forcing outcomes, without panicking, without breaking yourself just to prove something to people who are not living your life. Tonight, as you listen, something will start to soften. The pressure in your chest will ease, the noise in your head will slow down, and the part of you that feels rushed will finally breathe again. You'll start to see that your pace is not a problem, your path is not late, and your timing is not wrong. It is simply yours. This isn't just another video for comfort. This is a reset of how you measure your life. Are you ready? Let's begin. If you stayed this far, a part of you already knows something never felt right about the way life was explained to you. The pressure, the silent panic, the feeling that time is chasing you instead of walking with you. So now, we slow everything down and look at the belief that created that pressure in the first place. There is a quiet grief that comes from believing you are late to your own life. It sits in your chest when birthdays pass, when you see others reaching milestones, when another year ends and you feel like you did not move fast enough. No one teaches you how heavy that invisible clock can become. You were told time is a straight road, that everyone starts at the same place and moves forward at the same speed, that success is simply a matter of keeping up. But nothing in existence actually works that way. Look at nature closely and you will see no straight lines. The seasons repeat, the moon cycles, day turns into night and back again. Even your breath is not linear, it rises and falls. If life were truly a race, winter would be a failure because it produces nothing visible. Yet winter is when the soil restores itself. It is when roots deepen in silence. Without it, spring would never arrive. Your life moves the same way, through visible seasons and invisible ones, through periods of expansion and periods of quiet rebuilding. The Western obsession with timelines created a silent form of suffering because it turned time into a measuring stick instead of a living process. You were taught to ask, how far, how fast, how soon. Rarely were you taught to ask how deeply. When you measure your life only by speed, you miss the meaning of the slow parts. You start to see rest as weakness, uncertainty as failure, and redirection as falling off track. But what if there was never a single track to begin with? Buddhist thought does not see life as a straight path from beginning to end. It sees existence as cyclical, a continuous unfolding where lessons return in new forms until they are understood. You may think you are going backward when a familiar struggle appears again, but in reality, you are meeting it with new awareness. It is the same storm, but you are not the same person standing in the rain. What feels like repetition is often refinement. Consider how emotional growth happens. You do not overcome fear once and for all. You meet it at different stages of your life, each time with more wisdom than before. The fear of rejection in your 20s is not the same as the fear of irrelevance later on. The situation changes, the stakes change, but the lesson underneath remains connected. This is what makes life spiral rather than march forward. You return, but at a higher level of understanding. The illusion of linear time also creates the belief that there is a correct order for experiences. Study first, then career, then stability, then fulfillment. When life deviates from this order, panic begins. But fulfillment often comes before stability. Clarity sometimes arrives after chaos. Many people find their purpose only after losing everything that once defined them. These reversals are not mistakes. They are part of the spiral. When you release the need for life to move in a straight line, you stop interpreting detours as disasters. Losing a job becomes a redirection. Ending a relationship becomes space for a different kind of connection. Periods of confusion become incubation rather than evidence of failure. The story changes from "I am behind" to "I am in a different phase." There is also a hidden arrogance in the belief that life should follow your schedule. It assumes you know the perfect timing for everything, that you can see the entire path from your current position. But you are standing inside the painting trying to judge the whole picture. What feels delayed may be protection. What feels like stagnation may be preparation. What feels like loss may be clearing space for something you could not have received earlier. Think about skills that take years to develop. Patience, emotional regulation, self-awareness, resilience. These are not built through quick wins. They grow through repeated experiences, through moments that force you to slow down and look inward. A fast life can produce achievements without producing depth. A slower life often produces depth without immediate recognition. But depth lasts longer than applause. Another reason the race mentality creates suffering is because it assumes everyone started with the same conditions. It ignores differences in upbringing, resources, emotional support, opportunities, health, and countless invisible factors. Comparing timelines without acknowledging different starting points is like comparing two runners when one began miles ahead. It is not a fair measure, yet people do it to themselves every day. When you see life as a spiral, comparison loses its grip because no one occupies the exact same circle as you. Each person is moving through their own sequence of lessons, their own timing of growth, their own cycles of expansion and contraction. Someone may be ahead in one area and struggling deeply in another. From a distance, you only see the visible progress, not the hidden battles. The spiral perspective also explains why clarity often comes after confusion rather than before. You stumble through uncertainty, questioning everything, feeling lost, and then suddenly something aligns. A decision becomes obvious. A direction feels right. The confusion was not wasted time. It was the process of stripping away illusions until only truth remained. Straight lines do not allow for that kind of discovery. Spirals do. There is a quiet freedom in realizing you are allowed to grow in layers instead of steps. You do not have to rush to the next stage before you are ready. You do not have to abandon parts of yourself just to match someone else's pace. You can revisit dreams, change directions, start over without labeling it as failure. In a spiral, returning is not regression, it is continuation. Even healing follows this pattern. You think you have moved on, then something triggers an old wound and the pain resurfaces. It feels like proof that you made no progress, but look closely and you will notice your response is different. You understand more. You recover faster. You are less controlled by it. Healing did not disappear, it deepened. Time itself becomes less threatening when you stop treating it as an enemy. Instead of racing against it, you move with it. You allow experiences to ripen instead of forcing them prematurely. Just as fruit picked too early lacks sweetness, decisions made under panic often lack wisdom. Patience is not delay, it is timing. This shift in perspective does not remove ambition or desire. It simply removes desperation. You can still pursue goals, build a life, create meaning, but without the constant fear that you are running out of chances. You stop living as if there is a stopwatch counting down your worth. You start living as if each moment is part of a larger unfolding you do not need to control. There will still be days when doubt returns, when you question your pace, your direction, your choices. That is part of the human experience. But now there is another voice inside you, quieter but steadier, reminding you that growth is not always visible, that timing is not always logical, that your life is not a straight road you fail to follow, but a spiral still forming beneath your feet. And once you truly see this, something changes. The urgency softens, the shame loosens its grip. You begin to trust that even now, especially now, your life is moving exactly as it needs to, not rushed, not late, just unfolding. From this place, patience stops feeling like something you force and starts feeling like something you understand. Even after understanding that your life is not a race, the feeling of being behind can still sneak in quietly. Because the pressure was never only about time. It was about desire, about the silent urge that keeps scanning other people's lives and asking, why not me? So now we go deeper, past the illusion of timelines, into the force that keeps the comparison alive, even when you know better. There is a subtle discomfort that appears the moment you see someone doing well in an area where you feel uncertain. It is not always loud jealousy. Sometimes it is just a tightening in your chest, a sudden drop in your mood, a quiet thought that says you should have been there by now. This reaction feels automatic, almost physical, as if something inside you moved without permission. That movement has a name in Buddhist teaching. It is called tanha, the restless craving that keeps the mind searching, grasping, measuring, never fully satisfied with what is already present. Craving is often misunderstood as wanting material things, but its deeper form is the hunger for identity, the need to feel significant, secure, admired, validated. When you see someone else progressing, it threatens the identity you hope to build for yourself. Their success becomes evidence that you are falling short of a standard you never consciously agreed to, yet somehow feel bound by. This is how comparison begins. Not because others are ahead, but because craving whispers that their progress reduces your worth. The mind then creates a scoreboard. It starts assigning points to achievements, relationships, income, lifestyle, recognition. It tallies invisible numbers all day long. Someone gets married, they gain points. Someone travels the world, more points. Someone buys a house, even more. Meanwhile, your own experiences are discounted because they do not match the categories the scoreboard values. Quiet growth, emotional healing, internal clarity, these do not count in a system built on visible outcomes. This mental scoreboard is exhausting because it never closes. Even when you achieve something, the numbers shift. Someone else reaches a new milestone, and suddenly your victory feels smaller. You can never win a game where the rules change based on other people's lives. Craving ensures that satisfaction is always temporary. It feeds on the next comparison before you can fully experience peace. Social media intensified this habit by turning life into a continuous highlight reel. You are exposed to carefully curated moments of success without context, without struggle, without the ordinary days that make those moments meaningful. The mind forgets that you are comparing your full reality to someone else's selected fragments. Craving fills in the gaps with assumptions, turning incomplete information into proof of your inadequacy. But even without screens, comparison existed long before technology. It lives in conversations, in family expectations, in cultural narratives about what a successful life should look like. You grow up hearing certain milestones repeated so often, they become internal commands. By a certain age, you should be settled, accomplished, stable. When reality does not match those expectations, craving interprets the difference as failure rather than variation. What makes craving particularly painful is that it disguises itself as motivation. It tells you that dissatisfaction will push you forward, that discomfort is necessary for growth. But craving-driven action is fueled by fear, not clarity. It pushes you to chase goals that may not even belong to you. simply because achieving them promises relief from the feeling of being behind. When you finally reach them, the relief is brief because the underlying craving remains untouched. Buddhist wisdom teaches that craving is endless by design. It is not meant to be satisfied. It is meant to keep you running. The mind believes that once it obtains the next thing, peace will follow. But peace cannot coexist with a mind that constantly measures itself against others. As long as the scoreboard exists, there will always be someone ahead in some category. There will always be a new standard to chase. Letting go of comparison does not mean losing ambition. It means changing the source of your effort. Instead of moving from fear of being left behind, you move from curiosity about what genuinely matters to you. Goals chosen from clarity feel different. They do not carry urgency born from panic. They carry steadiness. You pursue them because they align with your values, not because they protect your ego. Another layer of craving is the desire for certainty. You want assurance that your path will lead somewhere meaningful, that your effort will not be wasted, that your patience will pay off. When you see others progressing visibly, it seems like proof that their direction is correct and yours is uncertain. This creates anxiety, which the mind tries to resolve by pushing you toward whatever looks most secure or socially approved. But certainty gained through imitation often leads to quiet dissatisfaction later, because you built your life around someone else's blueprint. Craving also narrows your attention. It makes you focus on what you lack rather than what you have developed. You overlook the skills you gained, the resilience you built, the insights you earned through difficult experiences. These forms of growth are invisible to the scoreboard, yet they shape your future more than any external milestone. When craving dominates, gratitude becomes difficult because the mind is always scanning for the next deficiency. There is freedom in recognizing that comparison is not a natural law, but a habit. Habits can be unlearned. The first step is awareness, noticing the moment your mind begins to measure your life against someone else's. Instead of following the thought, you pause and observe it. You see how quickly it escalates, how it constructs stories about your inadequacy without evidence. This observation creates distance. You are no longer inside the comparison. You're watching it happen. Compassion for yourself is essential here. Harsh self-judgment strengthens craving because it reinforces the belief that you must prove your worth. Gentleness interrupts the cycle. You remind yourself that your pace reflects your circumstances, your lessons, your priorities. You are not a delayed version of someone else. You are a different unfolding entirely. As craving loosens its grip, the scoreboard fades. Life becomes less about ranking and more about experiencing. You start noticing simple moments that once felt insignificant. A quiet morning, a conversation that leaves you lighter, progress that only you can see. These experiences were always available, but craving drowned them out with noise about what you should be achieving instead. You also begin to see others differently. Instead of viewing their success as a threat, you recognize it as evidence of possibility. Their path does not diminish yours. It expands the map of what can happen in a human life. Envy transforms into information. It shows you what resonates with you, what desires you have not yet acknowledged, what directions might bring fulfillment if pursued from authenticity rather than comparison. This shift takes time because craving is deeply rooted. It developed over years of conditioning, reinforced by a world that constantly encourages measuring, competing, striving for external validation. But every moment of awareness weakens it. Every decision made from clarity instead of fear strengthens your independence from the scoreboard. Eventually, the feeling of being behind loses its intensity because the concept itself stops making sense. Behind relative to what? According to whose timeline? Measured by which values? When these questions arise, the illusion becomes visible. You see that the pressure came from a system you never had to participate in, From that realization, patience grows naturally. Not forced patience, not the kind that feels like waiting for life to begin, but a calm trust that your path is unfolding at the pace it needs to. You stop rushing experiences that require time to mature. You stop abandoning directions just because someone else's results appeared faster. You stay with what feels true, even when it looks slow from the outside. And in that steadiness, something unexpected happens. Peace appears, not as a reward for achieving more, but as a byproduct of needing less from the future. The mind quiets because it is no longer calculating where you stand. It rests because there is nothing left to prove. What once felt like falling behind now feels like stepping off a treadmill that was never leading anywhere. You are still moving, still growing, still building a life, but without the constant tension of comparison. You are no longer chasing approval disguised as progress. You are simply living at your own rhythm, guided by values that do not require anyone else's timeline to validate them. And when you look back, you realize the strange truth. The moment you stopped trying to catch up was the moment you stopped feeling behind. And once the scoreboard begins to fade, another layer of pressure reveals itself. Because even without comparing yourself to others, there can still be a quiet voice inside whispering that you are late, that something important should have already happened, that life was supposed to look different by now. This is where the deepest suffering hides, not in other people's progress, but in the invisible deadlines you were never meant to carry. There is a specific kind of sadness that appears when you realize life did not unfold the way you once pictured it. It is not loud. It does not always come with tears. It feels more like a dull heaviness, a quiet disappointment that follows you through ordinary days. You wake up, go through routines, talk to people, smile when necessary, but underneath it all, there is a lingering sense that something is off. Not because your life is objectively bad, but because it does not match the version you expected to be living by now. This pain is confusing because nothing tangible is missing. You may have stability, relationships, opportunities, even moments of joy. Yet the discomfort persists. That is because you are not grieving your actual life. You are grieving an imagined future that never arrived. At some point, you formed a picture of how things would be. A certain age would bring clarity. A certain milestone would bring peace. A certain achievement would finally make you feel settled. When those markers passed without delivering what you hoped for, it felt like loss. The mind treats imagined futures as if they were promises. It does not remember that they were only guesses made from a limited perspective. When reality diverges from those guesses, disappointment turns into self-blame. You start asking what you did wrong, why you did not move faster, why others seemed to reach those milestones while you did not. But the real issue was never your pace. It was the belief that life was obligated to follow a script. Imaginary deadlines are powerful because they hide behind normal expectations. Graduate by this age. Establish a career by that age. Build a family by another. Achieve financial security before a certain point. These expectations are repeated so often they become internal rules. No one forces you to follow them, yet breaking them feels like failure because they were absorbed into your identity. The suffering intensifies when you measure your present against a timeline created by your past self. Years ago, you made plans based on who you were then, what you knew then, what you valued then. But people change, circumstances shift, priorities evolve. Holding yourself accountable to an outdated version of your vision is like forcing a grown tree to fit into the shape of the seed it once was. There is also a hidden cruelty in how the mind remembers those expectations. It edits out the uncertainty you felt when you first created them. It forgets the fear, the confusion, the lack of information. It presents the imagined future as if it were always realistic, always attainable, always within your control. This distortion makes your current reality seem like a deviation rather than a natural outcome of countless, unpredictable factors. Buddhist wisdom points out that suffering often comes not from reality itself, but from resistance to reality. The gap between what is and what you believed should be becomes the source of pain. You are not suffering because your life is incomplete. You are suffering because you are holding it against a phantom version that never had to face real conditions. There is relief in recognizing that no one's life unfolds exactly as planned. Even those who appear on schedule are adjusting constantly behind the scenes. Plans are revised, goals are abandoned, new desires emerge. The illusion of certainty exists only in hindsight, when people reshape their stories to look coherent. In the present, everyone is navigating uncertainty, even if they hide it well. Another layer of this suffering comes from the belief that time lost cannot be recovered. You look at years that did not produce visible achievements and label them wasted. But growth does not always leave external evidence. Some years are spent developing emotional strength, learning boundaries, healing wounds, gaining perspective. These changes do not show up on resumes or social media posts, yet they alter the direction of your life in ways you will only understand later. The idea of wasted time assumes that every moment must produce measurable progress. It ignores the role of reflection, rest, and recalibration. A field left fallow for a season is not wasted land. It is preparing for future harvest. In the same way, periods where nothing seems to move forward can be quietly rebuilding your capacity for what comes next. Imaginary deadlines also create urgency that leads to rushed decisions. When you believe you are late, you may choose paths out of fear rather than alignment. You accept opportunities that do not fit, enter relationships that are not right, commit to directions that feel heavy instead of meaningful. Later, these choices create new forms of dissatisfaction, reinforcing the belief that you are falling further behind. The cycle continues until you question the premise itself. Letting go of these deadlines does not mean abandoning responsibility for your life. It means responding to reality instead of chasing an outdated expectation. You start making decisions based on who you are now, not who you thought you would be. This shift reduces regret, because your actions align with your present truth rather than with an imagined version of success. There is also freedom in accepting that life's timing is influenced by factors beyond personal control. Economic conditions, health, family dynamics, chance encounters, unexpected losses all shape the path in ways no plan could anticipate. Recognizing this does not remove accountability, but it softens the harsh judgment you place on yourself for outcomes that were never entirely in your hands. The story of where you should be often comes from observing others who appear to have reached certain milestones earlier. But their journey is filtered through your assumptions. You do not see the sacrifices they made, the trade-offs they accepted, the struggles they endured privately. You are comparing your full experience to their visible highlights, then concluding that you missed your chance. When the mind stops clinging to these stories, the present becomes less threatening. You begin to notice what is actually available to you now instead of what you believe should have been achieved already. Opportunities that once seemed insignificant start to feel meaningful because they are no longer overshadowed by an imagined future. There is a quiet dignity in meeting your life where it is rather than where you expected it to be. You stop negotiating with the past. You stop replaying alternative scenarios that only deepen regret. You turn your attention to what can still be created, learned, experienced. This does not erase disappointment, but it transforms it into information instead of a verdict. Over time, you realize that the deadlines you feared missing were never fixed points. They were flexible ideas that hardened into perceived obligations. Once released, time feels less like an enemy and more like a space in which things can still unfold. You discover that progress does not require perfect timing. It requires presence. And in that presence, something unexpected happens. The grief for the imagined future begins to fade, not because you forced yourself to move on, but because you see that the life in front of you was never a consolation prize. It is simply the life that happened, shaped by countless visible and invisible forces, still open to change, still capable of meaning. The pain was never about being here. It was about believing you were supposed to be somewhere else. When that belief loosens, you stop mourning what never existed. You start living what does. As the grip of imaginary deadlines loosens, another truth quietly steps forward. Even if you release the timelines and the expectations, there can still be a restless part of you searching for something solid to hold on to, something that proves your life matters. That search often turns toward achievements, toward visible markers that say you are progressing, improving, becoming someone significant. This is where a deeper attachment begins to reveal itself. There is a strange emptiness that can appear right after accomplishing something you once believed would change everything. You work toward a goal for years, thinking it will finally bring relief, confidence, stability, maybe even happiness. And for a brief moment, it does. You feel lighter, proud, validated, but then the feeling fades faster than expected. Life returns to normal, and the silence that follows can feel heavier than before. You start looking for the next goal almost immediately, as if standing still would erase the meaning of what you just achieved. This pattern is not a personal failure. It is the nature of the ego. The ego feeds on milestones because they give it shape. Without achievements to point to, it feels exposed, undefined, unsure of its worth. So it pushes you to keep collecting proof that you are moving forward. Degrees, promotions, possessions, recognition, experiences. Each one becomes a temporary anchor for identity. For a short time you feel secure. Then the mind adjusts, and the new normal no longer feels special. The hunger returns. Achievement itself is not the problem. The problem arises when your sense of self becomes dependent on it. When who you are feels inseparable from what you have done, every pause in progress feels threatening. Rest becomes guilt. Contentment feels dangerous. You fear that if you stop producing results, you will disappear in the eyes of others, and perhaps even in your own eyes. This is why success often carries hidden anxiety. The more you achieve, the more there is to maintain. You worry about losing status, falling behind, being replaced, becoming irrelevant. What once felt like victory becomes responsibility. Instead of enjoying what you built, you become its caretaker, guarding it against time and change. Buddhist teachings describe this attachment as a source of ongoing dissatisfaction because it ties peace to conditions that are always shifting. Achievements exist in the world of impermanence. Markets change, trends shift, recognition fades, physical abilities decline, roles evolve. When identity is built on something unstable, stability becomes impossible. There is also a subtle comparison embedded in milestone thinking. Achievements rarely feel meaningful in isolation. Their value often comes from how they position you relative to others. A promotion matters because it signals advancement. A degree matters because it distinguishes you. A milestone feels significant because it places you ahead in some perceived hierarchy. Without that comparison, the ego struggles to interpret its importance. This creates a fragile sense of worth that depends on constant external feedback. Praise feels essential. Validation becomes addictive. Criticism feels devastating because it threatens the identity you constructed. Even neutral responses can feel unsettling because they do not reinforce the story of success you rely on. Over time, the pursuit of milestones can disconnect you from the original reasons you started. You may forget whether the goal actually mattered to you or whether it simply promised approval. The process becomes mechanical. Achieve, adjust, pursue the next. Life turns into a series of targets rather than a continuous experience. There is also the risk of postponing happiness indefinitely. You tell yourself you will relax after the next accomplishment, after the next level, after the next phase. But each achievement reveals another horizon. The finish line moves forward, keeping satisfaction just out of reach. You become skilled at striving, but inexperienced at resting. What makes this cycle particularly difficult to escape is that society rewards it. Productivity is praised, ambition is admired. Slowing down can be misinterpreted as complacency. So even when you sense the emptiness behind constant striving, stepping back feels uncomfortable, almost irresponsible. You worry about losing momentum, missing opportunities, falling behind again. Yet there is a difference between purposeful effort and compulsive striving. Purposeful effort comes from alignment with your values. It feels focused, but not frantic. It allows space for reflection, relationships, and rest. Compulsive striving comes from fear of inadequacy. It feels urgent, tense, and endless. The destination matters less than the relief you hope it will provide. Buddhist wisdom invites you to shift your attention from outcomes to intentions. Instead of asking what you achieved, you begin asking how you lived while pursuing it. Were you present or constantly rushing? Were you connected to others or isolated in your pursuit? Did the process enrich you or drain you? These questions redefine success in a way that does not depend on milestones. When identity is no longer tied to accomplishments, achievements can be enjoyed without pressure. They become expressions of your abilities rather than proof of your worth. You can celebrate them without fearing their loss because they do not hold your sense of self together. You remain steady whether progress is visible or not. Another unexpected change occurs. You start noticing aspects of life that were overshadowed by constant striving. Simple moments gain significance. Conversations feel deeper. Creativity becomes playful instead of performance-driven. You discover forms of fulfillment that do not require recognition or comparison. There is also greater resilience when things do not go as planned. Failure no longer threatens your identity because your identity is not built on success alone. Setbacks become information rather than verdicts. You adapt instead of collapsing into self-doubt. This flexibility allows growth without the emotional volatility that comes from attaching self-worth to results. Letting go of the ego's addiction to milestones does not mean abandoning goals. It means holding them lightly. You pursue what matters without believing it will complete you. You allow achievements to enrich your life without demanding that they define it. This balance creates a quieter kind of confidence, one that does not depend on constant reinforcement. Over time, you realize that peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was available in the way you walked the path, the moments you were fully present, the times you acted with integrity, the connections you nurtured, the awareness you cultivated. These experiences cannot be taken away because they do not rely on external markers. The strange irony is that when you stop chasing milestones for validation, your actions often become more effective. Without the pressure of proving yourself, your attention sharpens. You make decisions based on clarity rather than fear. Creativity flows more freely because it is not constrained by the need to impress. Eventually, the question shifts from what have I accomplished to who am I becoming? This question opens space for growth that is not limited to measurable outcomes. It values qualities like patience, compassion, wisdom, courage, presence. These cannot be displayed on a scoreboard, yet they shape the depth and meaning of your life. You begin to see that a person can accumulate countless achievements and still feel incomplete if they never learned how to be at peace with themselves. And another person can live a simple life, with few visible milestones, yet carry a quiet contentment that cannot be shaken. The difference lies not in what they did, but in what they attached their identity to. As this understanding settles in, the need to constantly prove yourself starts to dissolve. You move through life with intention rather than urgency. You still build, create, contribute, but without the heavy expectation that each accomplishment must secure your happiness. And in that shift, a deeper form of freedom appears. You are no longer driven by the fear of not being enough. You are guided by the desire to live fully, regardless of how it looks from the outside. The milestones become part of your story, not the foundation of your worth. Peace was never something achievement could deliver. It was something achievement distracted you from noticing. When the need to prove yourself begins to loosen, something unexpected becomes visible. You start noticing that life has been unfolding on its own rhythm the entire time, independent of your urgency, independent of your fears. There is a quiet intelligence moving beneath the surface, arranging encounters, delays, opportunities, and pauses in ways you could never fully control. This is where the idea of timing stops feeling random and starts feeling meaningful. There is a particular kind of confusion that appears when you see someone else receiving something you have been working toward for years. It can feel unfair, disorienting, even discouraging. You wonder what they did right, what you did wrong, why their path opened while yours remained uncertain. It is easy to conclude that life is inconsistent or that effort does not matter. But this reaction comes from assuming that all growth follows the same schedule. In Buddhist understanding, causes and conditions shape outcomes in ways that are too complex to measure from the outside. Every person is living through a unique combination of past actions, present circumstances, inner tendencies, relationships, opportunities, and unseen influences. What appears as sudden success may be the result of foundations laid long before you met them. What looks like delay in your life may be preparation for something that requires a deeper base. A seed planted in winter does not grow faster because another plant bloomed in spring. Each seed responds to its own conditions. Some require darkness before they can sprout. Others need exposure to cold before they can break open. Growth is not only about effort, it is about readiness. Without readiness, forcing progress often leads to fragile results that cannot endure. Comparing your harvest to someone else's planting cycle creates unnecessary suffering because you are judging different stages as if they were the same moment. You may be watching someone enjoy the results of years of quiet work while you are still building the roots of your own path. From the surface, it looks like they are ahead. In reality, you are simply at different points in processes that cannot be synchronized. There is also the illusion that visible progress is the only meaningful kind. You see promotions, relationships, financial milestones, public recognition. What you do not see are the internal shifts that made those outcomes possible. The doubts they overcame, the skills they practiced in private, the failures that refined their judgment, the losses that shaped their priorities. Without those hidden stages, the visible achievements would not exist. Your own invisible stages may be happening right now. Periods where nothing seems to move forward externally can be times when your perception changes, your resilience strengthens, your understanding deepens. These developments may not impress anyone, but they alter the quality of your future decisions. When opportunities appear, you will be able to meet them with a steadiness that would not have been possible earlier. There is a tendency to see delay as denial, to assume that if something has not happened yet, it never will. But delay often protects you from outcomes you are not ready to handle. Responsibility, success, and even happiness can be overwhelming if they arrive before you have the capacity to sustain them. Timing ensures that growth matches what you can hold without collapsing under its weight. Think about how relationships form. Meeting the right person at the wrong time can lead to misunderstanding or loss. Meeting them later, after both of you have matured, creates a different experience entirely. The connection is not stronger because the people changed faster, but because the timing allowed them to meet each other with greater clarity. Career paths unfold similarly. A role that would have felt impossible earlier becomes manageable after years of experience. Skills accumulate gradually, often unnoticed, until one day you realize you can handle challenges that once intimidated you. If those responsibilities had appeared sooner, they might have produced anxiety rather than growth. Karmic timing also explains why life sometimes removes things that once felt essential. Losing an opportunity, a relationship, or a plan can feel like regression, but it can also be the clearing of space for something more aligned with who you are becoming. Holding on to outdated paths can prevent you from recognizing new ones. What feels like loss may be adjustment. Patience becomes easier when you trust that nothing meant for you can truly pass you by. Effort still matters, intention still matters, but outcomes are influenced by countless variables beyond your control. Releasing the illusion of total control does not weaken your agency. It relieves you of the impossible task of managing every detail of existence. Another aspect of karmic timing is the idea that lessons repeat until they are understood. You may encounter similar situations with different people facing the same emotional challenges in new forms. This repetition is not punishment. It is refinement. Each encounter offers a chance to respond differently, to break patterns that once felt inevitable. When the lesson is integrated, the cycle shifts. Understanding this reduces the urge to rush through experiences. Instead of trying to escape discomfort immediately, you begin to ask what it is teaching you. Growth that comes from awareness lasts longer than growth forced by fear. You stop seeing challenges as obstacles to your timeline and start seeing them as parts of your development. There is also compassion in recognizing that everyone's path includes unseen struggles. The person you think is ahead may be facing difficulties you would not want to trade places with. Success in one area does not guarantee peace in another. When you see life as a complex web of causes and conditions rather than a simple race, envy softens into understanding. Gratitude naturally follows this understanding. You begin to appreciate what has unfolded in your life, even the delays, because they shaped qualities you now rely on. Strength, empathy, perspective, patience. These traits often emerge from periods that felt slow or painful at the time. Without them, future achievements would feel hollow. Trusting timing does not mean passivity. It means participating fully in the present while releasing the demand that everything align with your expectations. You continue to act, learn, connect, create, but without the tension that comes from constantly checking whether you are on schedule. You allow life to respond to your efforts in its own way. This approach also reduces fear of missing out. When you believe that opportunities are limited and must be seized immediately, every delay feels dangerous. But when you understand that paths intersect in unexpected ways, that new doors open as others close, urgency gives way to attentiveness. You focus on being ready rather than being early. There is a quiet confidence that grows from this perspective. You no longer interpret other people's progress as evidence of your inadequacy. Their journey becomes simply theirs. Yours remains uniquely shaped by the conditions surrounding you. Comparison loses its meaning because the contexts are too different to measure fairly. Eventually, you start to see that life has been guiding you towards certain experiences while steering you away from others. Not through force, but through subtle shifts, through coincidences that feel meaningful, through obstacles that redirect your attention. What once felt like randomness begins to feel like direction, and in that recognition, patience stops feeling like endurance and starts feeling like cooperation. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are participating in its unfolding without demanding immediate results. You trust that what needs to grow is growing, even if you cannot see it yet. The feeling of being behind dissolves because you realize there was never a universal schedule to begin with. There were only different seeds, planted in different soil, under different skies, responding to different seasons. Your task is not to bloom on command, but to keep nurturing the conditions that allow your growth to happen naturally. When the time is right, what is meant to emerge will emerge. Not rushed, not forced, not compared. Simply ready. And even when you begin to trust timing, another obstacle quietly remains. Because sometimes the harshest pressure does not come from society, from comparison, or from invisible deadlines. It comes from the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. Timing may be unfolding perfectly, yet if you are constantly attacking yourself for where you are, growth begins to stall. This is where the deepest wound often hides. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes not from effort, but from self-criticism that never turns off. You move through your day carrying an inner voice that questions everything you do. It reminds you of mistakes you made years ago, replays moments you wish you handled differently, points out every flaw in your progress. Even when you accomplish something, it minimizes it. Even when you rest, it calls you lazy. This voice feels like discipline at first, like it is trying to keep you accountable. But over time, it becomes a source of quiet violence. Self-rejection is rarely dramatic. It does not always sound like hatred. Often it sounds reasonable, even logical. It says you should be better by now, that others are handling life more gracefully, that your struggles are evidence of weakness. It convinces you that being hard on yourself will push you forward, that kindness would only make you complacent. But what it actually does is drain the energy needed for change. When you constantly fight yourself, your mind becomes a battleground instead of a place of clarity. Every decision feels heavier because it is filtered through fear of judgment. You hesitate to try new things because failure would confirm the negative beliefs you already hold. You delay action because you expect disappointment. Progress slows not because you lack ability, but because you lack safety within your own mind. Buddhist teachings describe compassion not as softness, but as wisdom. Compassion recognizes suffering without amplifying it. It understands that pain does not disappear through punishment. Just as a wound heals faster when treated gently rather than struck repeatedly, the mind recovers faster when met with understanding rather than hostility. Harsh self-judgment often originates from the belief that your worth is conditional, that you must earn acceptance through performance, improvement, perfection. If you fail, you lose permission to feel okay. This belief turns life into a constant test, where even small mistakes feel catastrophic because they threaten your sense of belonging. But compassion shifts the foundation entirely. Instead of earning acceptance, you start from it. You acknowledge that being human includes confusion, fear, inconsistency, growth through error. You stop treating imperfection as evidence of failure and start seeing it as the raw material of development. This shift does not remove responsibility. It changes the emotional climate in which responsibility operates. When you accept yourself, you are more willing to look honestly at what needs to change because you are not defending against shame. You can admit weaknesses without collapsing into self-hatred. You can learn without feeling exposed. There is also a practical advantage to compassion. It preserves energy. Self-criticism consumes mental resources that could be used for creativity, problem-solving, and action. When that energy is no longer wasted on internal conflict, momentum becomes easier. You move forward because you want to grow, not because you are trying to escape your own disapproval. Another effect of self-rejection is that it narrows your identity. You start defining yourself by your worst moments, your slowest periods, your most visible flaws. You forget the complexity of who you are, the strengths you developed, the kindness you showed, the resilience you demonstrated. Compassion restores perspective. It allows you to see yourself as a whole person rather than a collection of mistakes. Compassion also changes how you interpret setbacks. Instead of asking what is wrong with you, you ask what is happening to you. Instead of concluding that you are incapable, you consider whether you are tired, overwhelmed, unsupported, misaligned with your environment. This curiosity opens possibilities for adjustment rather than resignation. The fear that compassion will lead to complacency comes from misunderstanding its nature. True compassion does not excuse harmful behavior or justify avoidance. It creates the emotional stability needed to confront difficult truths without collapsing. It allows you to hold yourself accountable while remaining on your own side. Think about how you would treat a friend going through a hard time. You would listen, encourage, remind them of their strengths, offer perspective. You would not call them useless or hopeless. You would not insist they should have everything figured out immediately. Yet many people deny themselves this same care, believing they must be their own harshest critic to succeed. This internal double standard creates loneliness because it isolates you from yourself. You become someone you have to manage rather than someone you trust. Compassion repairs this relationship. It makes your mind a place you can return to instead of escape from. There is also a deeper reason why self-rejection blocks growth. When you reject parts of yourself, you push them into the background rather than understanding them. Unacknowledged fears, desires, insecurities continue influencing your decisions indirectly. Compassion brings them into awareness where they can be integrated rather than suppressed. Over time, this integration leads to authenticity. You stop pretending to be someone you are not, just to meet expectations. You make choices aligned with your actual needs and values. Growth becomes sustainable because it is rooted in truth rather than performance. Compassion also enhances patience. When you stop demanding instant transformation, you allow gradual change to occur. You recognize that habits formed over years require time to shift. You appreciate small improvements instead of dismissing them because they are not dramatic. This appreciation reinforces motivation more effectively than criticism ever could. There is a quiet courage in treating yourself gently in a world that often equates harshness with strength. It requires trusting that you do not need to be threatened into becoming better. That care can be as powerful as pressure. That understanding can move you forward without breaking you. As compassion deepens, the inner voice that once attacked you begins to soften. It still notices mistakes, but without cruelty. It still encourages growth, but without panic. It becomes a guide rather than a tyrant. You start feeling supported from within, which changes how you face external challenges. This inner support also reduces dependence on validation from others. When you are no longer at war with yourself, approval becomes pleasant but not essential. Criticism becomes information rather than a verdict. You remain steady because your foundation does not rely on external opinions. Eventually, you realize that the violence of self-rejection was never helping you move faster. It was keeping you stuck in cycles of shame and avoidance. Compassion, on the other hand, creates space for honest effort, for learning, for resilience. It does not remove difficulty, but it removes the additional suffering you were adding to it. And in that space, growth resumes naturally. Not forced, not frantic, not driven by fear, but guided by a quiet determination that comes from knowing you are allowed to evolve at your own pace. You stop trying to outrun your imperfections and start walking alongside them, transforming them gradually through awareness and care. This is how compassion becomes momentum, not as comfort that keeps you still, but as stability that allows you to move without breaking. As compassion begins to replace harshness, you may notice a subtle shift inside you. The pressure softens, the urgency eases, and for a moment it feels like you can finally rest. But then another habit appears, quieter than self-criticism, yet just as powerful. The tendency to push peace into the future, to believe that calm will come later, after one more problem is solved, after one more goal is reached. This is where anxiety quietly rebuilds itself, even in a kinder mind. There is a sentence many people repeat without realizing how much it controls them. It sounds harmless, almost hopeful. I will be okay when things settle down. I will relax when I finish this phase. I will feel secure when I reach that milestone. On the surface, it sounds like patience. In reality, it is postponement. It trains your mind to believe that peace is conditional, something you earn after life becomes perfect. The problem is that life never reaches that perfect state. As soon as one challenge fades, another appears. Responsibilities shift. New uncertainties replace old ones. Conditions change faster than expectations can keep up, so the moment you thought would finally allow you to breathe keeps moving forward, always just out of reach. You end up living in a constant state of preparation for a future that never stabilizes. This creates a quiet tension in everyday life. Even during calm moments, part of your mind remains alert, scanning for what still needs to be fixed before you can truly relax. Joy feels incomplete because it is overshadowed by unfinished tasks or unresolved worries. You sit with friends but think about work. You rest but feel guilty for not being productive. You achieve something but immediately focus on the next requirement. Future-based happiness turns the present into a waiting room. You are always about to live, about to enjoy, about to feel whole, but not yet. Days pass while you rehearse a life that supposedly begins later. Meanwhile, the actual life happening now becomes background noise. Buddhist teachings point out that anxiety thrives on this postponement because it keeps attention fixed on uncertainty. When happiness is placed in the future, your emotional state depends on events you cannot fully control. You worry about whether things will unfold as planned, whether obstacles will appear, whether you will be ready when the time comes. The mind tries to predict and manage outcomes, exhausting itself in the process. There is also a hidden fear beneath future-based thinking, the fear that if you allow yourself to feel okay now, you will lose motivation. That contentment will make you complacent, that without pressure, you will stop growing. So you withhold peace from yourself as a way to stay driven. You become both the taskmaster and the prisoner. But pressure is not the same as purpose. Pressure pushes you forward with urgency and fear. Purpose pulls you forward with clarity and meaning. One drains energy, the other generates it. When you rely on future happiness as motivation, you risk burning out before reaching the destination you were chasing. Another consequence of postponing peace is that it reduces resilience. If you believe you can only feel okay under ideal conditions, any disruption becomes overwhelming. You have not practiced stability in imperfect circumstances, so instability feels unbearable. Learning to access calm in the present, even when things are unfinished, strengthens your ability to handle whatever comes next. There is a quiet paradox here. Many of the goals people pursue are meant to reduce stress, yet the way they pursue them increases stress. They sacrifice well-being in the present for the promise of well-being later, not realizing that the habit of postponement will continue even after the goal is reached. Without addressing the mindset, new reasons to delay happiness will always appear. Future-based happiness also distorts how you experience progress. Instead of appreciating each step forward, you treat progress as insufficient until the final outcome arrives. This creates a sense of never being satisfied, even when life improves. Achievements feel hollow because they were never meant to be enjoyed on their own, only as gateways to the next stage. Relationships can suffer under this mindset as well. When your attention is constantly directed toward what is next, you may miss what is happening with the people around you. Conversations become shorter. Presence becomes fragmented. You may physically be there, but mentally somewhere else, rehearsing future scenarios instead of participating in the moment you share with others. Learning to experience happiness in the present does not mean ignoring problems or abandoning goals. It means recognizing that peace is a state you can cultivate alongside effort. You can work toward improvement without believing that your emotional well-being must wait until everything is resolved. This approach makes progress sustainable because it does not rely on crisis-level urgency. One way to shift out of the trap is to notice the language you use with yourself. Pay attention to how often you say when instead of now. I will relax when this is done. I will be proud when I reach that point. I will enjoy life when things are stable. Each statement reinforces the idea that your current state is not allowed to include peace. Replacing these thoughts with permission to feel okay now begins to retrain your mind. There is also value in recognizing that the future you are waiting for will eventually become another present moment. If you cannot be at ease now, you will likely carry the same restlessness into that future. The conditions will change, but the habit of postponement will remain unless it is addressed directly. Practicing presence helps weaken this habit. When you focus on what is actually happening rather than what might happen, the mind has less material to worry about. You notice simple details, physical sensations, the rhythm of your breath, the environment around you. These anchors bring attention back from imagined scenarios to lived experience. Gratitude also plays a role, not as forced positivity, but as acknowledgement of what is already supporting you. The stability you do have, the relationships that exist, the skills you developed, the opportunities still available. Gratitude shifts attention from absence to presence, reducing the urgency to escape into the future. Over time, you begin to trust that peace does not weaken ambition, it strengthens it. When your mind is not overwhelmed by anxiety, your decisions become clearer. You respond rather than react. You choose actions based on intention instead of panic. This clarity often leads to more effective progress than stress ever did. There is a deep relief in realizing that you do not have to wait for life to calm down before allowing yourself to calm down. You can carry steadiness into chaos rather than waiting for chaos to disappear. This ability transforms how you experience uncertainty. Instead of fearing it, you navigate it with a sense of groundedness. Eventually, the sentence, "I will be okay," begins to fade. In its place comes a quieter understanding. I am okay now, even while things are unfinished. I can pursue change without rejecting the present. I can build a future without abandoning the life already happening. And in that realization, anxiety loses its main source of fuel. The future stops being a place where peace is stored and starts being simply another direction life will unfold toward. You no longer chase it as an escape. You walk toward it with calm, knowing that wherever you arrive, you will meet it with the same steadiness you learned to cultivate here. This is how the trap dissolves, not by controlling what happens next, but by no longer needing what happens next to determine how you feel now. When you stop postponing peace and begin allowing yourself to breathe in the present, something subtle starts to reveal itself. You notice that change has been happening quietly all along, even during the times you believed nothing was moving. The anxiety fades, and in its place comes a quieter awareness. Growth does not always announce itself. Sometimes it happens so silently that you only recognize it long after it has reshaped you. There is a kind of progress that leaves no footprints. No celebration, no recognition, no dramatic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It unfolds in small decisions, in habits you adjust, in reactions you choose not to have. On the outside, your life may look the same to others. Inside, entire landscapes are shifting, values are clarifying, boundaries are forming, old fears are loosening their grip. But because these changes do not produce visible results immediately, the mind is tempted to dismiss them as insignificant. This is why people often feel stuck, even while they are evolving. The world tends to acknowledge only what can be seen and measured. Promotions, purchases, public achievements, milestones that fit neatly into narratives of success. Quiet resilience, emotional maturity, self-awareness, these rarely receive applause. Yet they determine the quality of everything else you build. Invisible progress often begins during the hardest periods of life. Times when plans fall apart, when certainty disappears, when you are forced to confront parts of yourself you once avoided. From the outside, it may look like stagnation or decline. From the inside, something essential is being reorganized. You are learning what matters, what does not, what you can endure, what you need to release. These realizations do not show up on timelines, but they alter your direction permanently. One of the most powerful forms of invisible growth is learning how to regulate your emotions. The first time you pause instead of reacting, no one may notice. The first time you walk away from a situation that once would have consumed you, there may be no audience. The first time you forgive yourself for something you carried for years, the world continues as if nothing happened. But these moments mark a shift from being controlled by circumstances to responding with awareness. Another quiet transformation happens when you stop seeking validation for every decision. You begin trusting your own judgment, even when it does not align with popular expectations. This independence can look like withdrawal to others, but internally it is stability forming. You are no longer pulled in every direction by external opinions. You are learning to move according to your values rather than your fears. Invisible progress also appears in the way you handle uncertainty. Instead of needing immediate answers, you become more comfortable with not knowing. You allow situations to unfold without forcing conclusions. This patience is not passive. It is the result of recognizing that clarity often emerges through experience rather than analysis. Again, no one applauds this shift, but it reduces anxiety and improves decision-making in ways that are difficult to measure. There is a reason why the most meaningful changes take time to surface. They involve rewiring patterns that developed over years. Habits of thought, emotional responses, coping mechanisms, beliefs about yourself and the world. These cannot be replaced overnight. They dissolve gradually as new ways of being are practiced repeatedly. During this process, there may be no visible evidence that anything is happening. Yet, beneath the surface, the foundation of your future is being rebuilt. Consider how physical strength develops. Muscles grow through tiny tears that repair stronger than before. The effort happens during training, but the growth occurs during rest, when nothing appears to be happening. Personal development works the same way. Periods of stillness often follow intense experiences, allowing integration to occur. Without these quiet phases, progress would remain superficial. Invisible growth can also be lonely because it changes how you relate to others. You may outgrow conversations that once felt comfortable. You may lose interest in dynamics that relied on your old patterns. This distance is not rejection. It is alignment shifting. You are becoming someone who no longer fits certain roles, even if others still expect you to play them. There is courage in continuing this path without external validation. It requires trusting that the work you are doing internally will eventually influence your external life, even if the connection is not immediate. Over time, the effects become visible through the quality of your relationships, the clarity of your choices, the calmness you bring into situations that once overwhelmed you. Invisible progress also prepares you for opportunities you cannot yet see. When change finally appears externally, It often seems sudden to others. They may call it luck or timing, unaware of the quiet preparation that made you ready. What they perceive as an overnight transformation was actually years of unseen effort accumulating beneath the surface. This understanding reduces the urge to rush. You stop demanding visible results as proof that your life is moving forward. You begin to respect the hidden phases as necessary parts of development. Just as roots grow before branches, inner stability forms before outer expansion. There is also peace in recognizing that not everything meaningful needs to be shared or displayed. Some experiences are valuable precisely because they are private. They belong to your internal world, shaping you in ways that do not require recognition. This privacy protects the authenticity of your growth from becoming another performance. Over time, you learn to measure progress differently. Instead of asking what changed around you, you ask what changed within you. Are you calmer than before, more honest, more patient, more compassionate, more resilient? These shifts may not impress anyone else, but they determine how you experience life. Invisible progress also deepens empathy. As you become aware of your own quiet struggles and gradual transformations, you start recognizing that others are likely carrying unseen battles as well. This softens judgment and increases understanding. You stop assuming that appearances reflect reality. Eventually, the need for applause fades because you realize that external recognition cannot capture the depth of internal change. You do not require proof from others to know that you are evolving. Your confidence comes from lived experience rather than validation, and in that quiet confidence, something powerful happens. You begin to move through life with less noise, less urgency, less need to explain yourself. You trust the process unfolding inside you, even when it cannot be summarized or displayed. What once felt like stagnation reveals itself as incubation. What once felt like invisibility becomes freedom from performance. You understand that the most important parts of your life are not the ones everyone sees, but the ones that shape who you become when no one is watching. This is the quiet power of growth without applause. It does not demand attention. It does not compete for recognition. It simply transforms you from the inside until one day you realize you are responding to life differently, thinking differently, feeling differently. The change is undeniable, even if no one can pinpoint when it happened. And when you look back, you see that the seasons you once doubted were the ones that built the strongest parts of you. Not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through steady, invisible progress that never needed permission to continue. And as you begin to recognize the depth of change happening quietly within you, another illusion starts to weaken. The belief that you were ever behind in the first place. Because once you see how much growth happens outside of public view, the idea of ranking lives against each other starts to feel strangely artificial. You begin to question the system that convinced you your worth could be measured by position, speed, or status. There is a quiet pressure many people carry that has no clear origin. A sense that life is structured like a race with invisible lanes, that everyone is supposed to move forward in a predictable order, that progress can be compared across completely different experiences. This pressure rarely comes from one person. It is absorbed over years from conversations, expectations, cultural narratives, and repeated images of what success is supposed to look like. Eventually, it becomes an internal voice that speaks as if it were truth. The mind creates hierarchies to simplify a complex world. It sorts people into categories based on achievements, wealth, relationships, education, appearance, influence. These categories create the illusion of order, as if life could be understood by ranking outcomes. But this structure ignores the vast differences in what people value, what they endure, and what they seek from existence. When you believe in these hierarchies, every interaction becomes a subtle evaluation. You compare yourself to strangers, friends, even family members. You look for clues about where you stand. Someone younger achieving something you have not becomes evidence that you are falling behind. Someone older struggling becomes reassurance that you are doing okay. Your emotional state rises and falls based on information that has little to do with your actual life. This habit turns life into a performance rather than an experience. You start choosing paths that look impressive instead of those that feel meaningful. Decisions become influenced by how they will be perceived rather than how they will shape your inner world. You measure success by visibility instead of fulfillment. Buddhist thought challenges this entire framework by pointing out that worth cannot be quantified in the way the mind attempts. Each life is shaped by unique conditions that cannot be replicated or fairly compared. Judging one path against another is like comparing different species of trees and deciding which one is growing correctly. They are responding to different soil, different climates, different purposes. The myth of falling behind depends on the belief that there is a standard destination everyone should reach. But destinations vary as much as starting points. Some people prioritize stability, others creativity, others service, others exploration. These priorities lead to different rhythms of life. What looks like delay in one framework may be intentional pacing in another. The idea of lanes is particularly limiting because it suggests that deviation is failure. Changing careers, moving to a new place, redefining goals, taking time for healing, all become seen as detours rather than evolution. Yet these shifts often lead to deeper alignment than staying on a path chosen out of fear or expectation. There is also the illusion that progress is linear and permanent. You reach a milestone and believe it secures your place in the hierarchy. But life continues to move, roles change, circumstances shift. What once felt stable becomes uncertain. Hierarchies are constantly rearranging themselves, revealing their instability. If worth depends on position within them, it will always feel fragile. Another problem with ranking lives is that it reduces complex human experiences to single dimensions. A person may be financially successful but emotionally unfulfilled. Another may have strong relationships but struggle with career direction. Someone may appear confident while battling private doubts. No hierarchy can capture these nuances, yet the mind treats surface indicators as definitive. The pressure to keep up with imagined standards can also disconnect you from your own intuition. You begin ignoring what genuinely matters to you because it does not align with what is valued publicly. Over time, this disconnection leads to confusion. You achieve things that should feel satisfying but do not, because they were never rooted in your personal values. Letting go of the myth requires questioning assumptions that once felt unquestionable. Who decided what success looks like? Who benefits from maintaining these hierarchies? Are they designed to support human well-being or to maintain systems of competition and comparison? These questions open space for redefining your relationship with achievement and worth. When you step outside the ranking mindset, you start noticing diversity instead of hierarchy. Different ways of living, different definitions of fulfillment, different timelines of development. You see that people are not ahead or behind, just in different chapters of stories that cannot be synchronized. This perspective also brings relief from the need to constantly evaluate yourself. You no longer wake up scanning for signs of whether you are on track. You focus on what feels meaningful in the present rather than how your life appears from the outside. This shift reduces anxiety because it removes the need to maintain an image. Relationships change as well. Without the undercurrent of comparison, interactions become more genuine. You celebrate others' progress without interpreting it as commentary on your own. You offer support without feeling diminished. Connection replaces competition. There is also greater tolerance for uncertainty. When life is not viewed as a race, periods of transition lose their stigma. Being unsure about your direction becomes a phase rather than a flaw. Exploration becomes acceptable rather than risky. You allow yourself to grow through experience rather than through adherence to a predetermined plan. Over time, you may notice a quieter form of confidence emerging. It does not rely on outperforming others or meeting expectations. It comes from alignment between your actions and your values. This confidence is less visible but more stable because it is not threatened by external changes. The myth of falling behind dissolves further when you recognize that even the concept of time is interpreted differently across cultures and individuals. Some societies emphasize early achievement, others value maturity and experience. Some prize independence, others community. There is no universal clock, only varied perspectives on what matters and when. As this understanding deepens, the urgency to prove yourself fades. You stop trying to fit into categories that were never designed for you. You start shaping a life that reflects your unique combination of strengths, interests, and circumstances. This process may not look impressive to everyone, but it feels authentic. Authenticity replaces the need for approval because you are no longer performing for a ranking system. You are living in a way that makes sense to you, even if it confuses others. This independence can feel unfamiliar at first, but it becomes liberating over time. Eventually, the question of whether you are ahead or behind loses meaning entirely. There is only the question of whether you are living consciously, responding to life with awareness rather than reacting to pressure. Progress becomes internal rather than comparative. And in that shift, you discover something quietly radical. Life was never divided into lanes. There was no universal race, no official scoreboard, only individuals navigating their own paths, sometimes intersecting, sometimes diverging, always shaped by forces too complex to reduce to rankings. What once felt like falling behind now feels like stepping off an imaginary track. You are still moving, still growing, still building a life, but without the burden of proving your position. The pressure dissolves because the framework that created it no longer holds power over you. You realize that worth was never determined by speed or sequence. It was always present, waiting to be recognized once you stopped measuring yourself against illusions. When the illusion of rankings falls away, something unfamiliar appears in its place. A wide open space where you are no longer pushed by comparison or deadlines, yet not entirely certain what comes next. Freedom can feel disorienting when you are used to pressure guiding your steps. Without the urgency to catch up, you are left with uncertainty, and this is where a deeper form of strength is required. There is a quiet fear that surfaces when outcomes are unclear. The mind wants resolution, something definite to hold on to, a sign that everything will work out. When that certainty is missing, anxiety tries to fill the gap by forcing decisions, rushing timelines, or clinging to the first available solution just to escape the discomfort of not knowing. This impulse is often mistaken for action, but it is actually avoidance. It is an attempt to control what cannot yet be controlled. Patience, in its truest form, is the willingness to remain present in that uncertainty without collapsing into panic. It is not waiting passively for life to happen. It is staying grounded while life unfolds in ways you cannot predict. This requires emotional bravery because it means facing the unknown without the shield of immediate answers. Many people associate courage with dramatic actions, bold decisions, visible risks. But there is another kind of courage that receives little recognition. The courage to pause instead of reacting. The courage to trust the process when evidence is incomplete. The courage to resist the urge to force clarity before it naturally arrives. This form of strength is quiet, almost invisible, yet it shapes the quality of your choices more than any impulsive move ever could. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because it exposes how little control we truly have. Plans can shift overnight. Opportunities can appear unexpectedly or disappear just as quickly. Relationships evolve in ways no one anticipates. Health, finances, circumstances all exist within a web of variables beyond individual command. Accepting this reality does not weaken you. It aligns you with how life actually works. When you try to force outcomes prematurely, you often create fragile solutions that cannot withstand pressure. Decisions made from fear tend to ignore important information, overlook long-term consequences, or prioritize relief over alignment. They solve the discomfort of the moment, but generate new problems later. Patience allows time for deeper understanding to emerge, leading to choices that feel steadier because they are rooted in clarity rather than urgency. There is also wisdom in recognizing that uncertainty is not empty space. It is a period where invisible processes are unfolding. Information is accumulating, perspectives are shifting. People around you are evolving, conditions are changing in subtle ways that may not be visible yet. Acting too soon can interrupt these developments, closing doors that would have opened if given time. Patience requires trust, not blind optimism, but trust in your capacity to respond when the moment is right. Instead of demanding certainty in advance, you rely on your ability to adapt. This mindset reduces anxiety because you are not trying to predict every outcome. You are preparing yourself to meet whatever arises with presence and awareness. Another aspect of patience as courage is resisting external pressure. Others may urge you to decide quickly, to commit, to move on, to settle. Their discomfort with ambiguity can become projected onto you. Standing firm in your own timing, even when it conflicts with expectations, takes strength. It means valuing alignment over approval. There is also a compassionate dimension to patience. When you allow yourself time, you reduce the harshness that often accompanies rushed decisions. You give space for emotions to settle, for insight to develop, for intuition to speak without being drowned out by fear. This gentleness leads to wiser action because it honors the complexity of your situation. Patience transforms how you experience waiting. Instead of viewing it as wasted time, you start seeing it as preparation. You use the period to learn, to reflect, to strengthen areas of your life that do not depend on the uncertain outcome. This proactive stillness keeps you engaged without forcing progress. Relationships benefit from this approach as well. When conflicts arise, immediate reactions can escalate tension. Allowing time for understanding often reveals perspectives that were hidden by emotion. Patience creates room for empathy, making resolution possible without damage that impulsive responses might cause. There is also freedom in accepting that not everything needs to be solved immediately. Some questions are meant to remain open until experience provides the answer. Forcing closure too early can limit growth, while allowing uncertainty can lead to discoveries you would never have reached otherwise. Over time, patience builds resilience. Each period of uncertainty you navigate without forcing outcomes increases your confidence in your ability to endure the unknown. You learn that discomfort does not have to be eliminated instantly, that clarity often follows confusion, that stability can emerge from chaos if given the chance. This resilience changes how you approach future challenges. Instead of reacting with panic, you remember that you have been here before. That uncertainty eventually resolves itself in ways you could not have planned. This memory becomes a source of calm during new storms. Patience also deepens appreciation for the present. When you stop rushing toward the future, you notice details that urgency once blurred. Conversations feel richer, experiences feel fuller. Time slows down, not because circumstances changed, but because your attention is no longer consumed by anticipation. There is a quiet dignity in moving at a pace that respects your emotional and mental readiness. You are not delaying out of fear, but advancing when conditions align. This alignment makes progress feel natural rather than forced, sustainable rather than exhausting. Eventually, you begin to see patience not as a temporary strategy, but as a way of being, a steady presence that remains intact regardless of external turbulence. This steadiness influences others as well. Your calm becomes reassurance in uncertain situations, your clarity a grounding force for those around you. And in that steadiness, the fear of the unknown loses its dominance. Uncertainty becomes part of the landscape rather than a threat to be eliminated. You stop trying to control every outcome and start participating in life as it unfolds. What once felt like waiting now feels like strength held in reserve, not passive, not stagnant, but poised, ready to act when the moment is right, willing to remain still when it is not. This balance is the essence of patience as courage. It is not loud, it does not seek recognition. But it allows you to walk through uncertainty without losing yourself, trusting that the path will reveal itself step by step, not because you forced it, but because you were brave enough to let it appear. As patience strengthens your ability to stand inside uncertainty, another habit quietly loses its grip. The urge to escape into stories about how life could have been different if only one decision had changed. When you stop forcing the future, the past begins to surface, not as memory alone, but as possibility that never happened. This is where the mind creates entire parallel lives and measures your present against them. There are moments when a simple memory can pull you into a completely different version of yourself. A road not taken, a conversation that ended too soon, a choice made under pressure, an opportunity missed because you were afraid or unprepared. The mind begins to construct an alternate reality where everything unfolded perfectly from that point forward. In that imagined life, you are more confident, more successful, more fulfilled, more understood. It feels vivid, almost tangible, as if it exists somewhere just beyond reach. This alternate life fantasy is powerful because it offers relief from regret. It allows you to believe that happiness was possible if circumstances had been slightly different. But it also creates a quiet dissatisfaction with your actual life. No matter what you achieve, it feels smaller compared to the idealized version you carry in your imagination. The mind edits these parallel universes carefully. It removes uncertainty, struggle, and unintended consequences. It assumes that every decision in that other life would have led to better outcomes, ignoring the fact that new challenges would have appeared there as well. It turns complexity into a simple narrative where one choice determines everything. Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment to these imagined selves keeps you trapped between what is and what could never be. You are not only living your current life, you are also mourning lives that were never lived, versions of yourself that exist only in speculation. This divided attention drains energy from the present, making it harder to engage fully with what is actually available to you. Regret often fuels this process. You replay situations searching for the exact moment when things diverged from your hopes. You analyze your actions with the clarity of hindsight, forgetting that at the time you were operating with limited information and emotional resources. Judging your past self with present awareness creates a standard no one could meet. There is also a hidden belief that your worth depends on making perfect decisions. When life does not match your expectations, it feels like evidence that you failed. The alternate life becomes proof that you were capable of more, that you somehow sabotaged your own potential. This belief ignores the unpredictable nature of life, where outcomes are influenced by countless factors beyond individual control. Letting go of these fantasies does not mean denying that different choices lead to different paths. It means recognizing that every path includes trade-offs. The career you did not pursue might have required sacrifices you were not willing or able to make. The relationship that ended might have changed you in ways you cannot fully see. The opportunity you missed might have led to pressures you were not ready to handle. Accepting this complexity reduces the idealization of the alternate life. You begin to see that it would not have been a perfect version of existence, just a different set of experiences with its own difficulties. This realization softens regret because it replaces certainty with humility. You acknowledge that you cannot know how that path would have unfolded. Another aspect of releasing these fantasies is understanding that identity is not fixed. You are not a single decision away from becoming a completely different person. Growth happens through accumulation of experiences, relationships, challenges, and insights. Even if you had chosen differently at one point, you would still have evolved through new circumstances, forming a unique version of yourself shaped by that path. The alternate life fantasy often ignores the value of what you have gained from your actual journey. Skills developed through hardship, empathy formed through loss, resilience built through uncertainty. These qualities may not have emerged in the imagined scenario. What feels like deviation may have been preparation for a depth of understanding you would not trade once you fully recognize it. Releasing the imagined self also restores compassion for your past decisions. Instead of seeing them as mistakes, you begin to view them as responses to the conditions you faced at the time. You acted with the knowledge, resources, and emotional capacity available to you. Blaming yourself for not being wiser sooner is like criticizing a child for not knowing what only experience can teach. Presence becomes easier when you stop splitting your attention between reality and speculation. You engage more deeply with the people, opportunities, and possibilities in front of you because you are no longer measuring them against a fantasy. The life you are living regains its richness when it is not overshadowed by comparisons to something imaginary. There is also freedom in recognizing that you are still shaping your story. The alternate life fantasy creates the illusion that your most important decisions are behind you, that the best opportunities were missed. In truth, life continues to present new possibilities, often in forms you could not have anticipated earlier. Releasing attachment to the past opens space to recognize these openings. Forgiveness plays a crucial role in this process, not as forgetting, but as releasing the emotional charge tied to those memories. You acknowledge what happened without allowing it to define your present. Forgiveness dissolves the tension between who you are and who you think you should have been. Over time, the imagined parallel universes lose their emotional intensity. They become simply stories your mind once used to process uncertainty. You no longer visit them as often because they no longer serve a purpose. Your attention shifts to building meaning from where you stand rather than from where you might have stood. There is a quiet peace in accepting that this life, with all its unexpected turns, is not a lesser version of something else. It is the only one unfolding, shaped by choices, circumstances, and chance in ways that cannot be reversed but can still be understood. You start to see continuity where you once saw fragmentation. The experiences that felt disconnected reveal patterns, lessons, connections that were not visible before. What looked like detours become part of a coherent narrative that makes sense in hindsight. And in that understanding, the question changes. Instead of asking what could have been, you begin asking what can still be created from here. This shift transforms regret into curiosity, loss into possibility. Freedom from the alternate life fantasy is not about convincing yourself everything happened for a reason. It is about recognizing that meaning is something you continue to shape, not something locked in the past. You are not trapped by previous decisions. You are informed by them. As this realization settles, the imagined versions of yourself fade into the background. They no longer compete for your attention because you are fully engaged with the person you are becoming now. The energy once spent on speculation becomes available for living. And in that presence, something unexpected emerges. Gratitude not for what happened instead, but for the clarity gained through the path you actually walked. You see that even the moments you would not choose again contributed to the depth you carry now. This is the freedom of releasing parallel lives. You stop chasing ghosts of possibility and start inhabiting the reality that is still open, still evolving, still capable of meaning. And when the alternate life finally starts to fade, something else becomes easier to notice. The mind stops arguing with the past, but it still has a habit of flinching at the present when it sees someone else winning. Because even when you accept your path, even when you stop chasing parallel versions of yourself, a sharp feeling can still rise the moment you watch another person receive what you secretly wanted. That feeling is not proof that you are broken. It is a signal, and if you learn how to read it, it can become one of the clearest guides you've ever had. A strange emotion shows up when someone you know announces good news. A promotion, a new relationship, a business success, a big move, a breakthrough. You smile, you say congratulations, you mean it, at least on the surface. But inside, something tightens. It's subtle, but it's real. Your stomach sinks, your chest feels heavy, your mind goes quiet for a second, then starts talking fast. Good for them. Why not me? What am I doing with my life? Am I wasting time? Will it ever be my turn? That is the anxiety of watching others win. And it hurts because it doesn't just show you what they have. It shows you what you believe you lack. It holds up a mirror to your unfinished desires. It exposes the places in your life where you still feel uncertain, where you still feel invisible, where you still feel like time is moving and you're standing still. Most people treat envy like a shameful weakness, so they hide it, they deny it, they pretend they don't care, or they turn it into bitterness so they can feel stronger. They start criticizing the person who is winning. They tell themselves it's luck, they call it fake, they search for flaws to reduce the sting, but none of this removes the pain, it only buries it, and buried emotions don't disappear. They leak into your mood, your motivation, your relationships, your confidence. They make you tired without understanding why. Buddhist wisdom doesn't tell you to pretend envy isn't there. It teaches you to look at it clearly, not with judgment, with honesty, because envy is not just poison. Envy is information. The mind becomes jealous when it sees something it values. That's the first truth. If you feel nothing when someone buys a new car, it's probably not important to you. If you feel nothing when someone gets married, it may not be your priority right now. But when a certain kind of win makes your heart react, it's revealing a desire you have not fully admitted, or a desire you admitted but stopped believing was possible. This is why jealousy can become a compass. It points to what matters to you. It points to what you want to experience. It points to what you might be ignoring. It shows you what you still crave, not because you're bad, but because you're human. The suffering begins when you interpret that compass as a verdict. When you see another person's success and conclude that it proves your failure. That is when envy becomes destructive. Not because the emotion exists, but because the story you attach to it is brutal. You tell yourself it's too late. You tell yourself you missed your chance. You tell yourself they're better than you. You tell yourself you don't have what it takes. And that story becomes heavier than the envy itself. The mind loves turning one moment into an identity. Someone else wins, and you become the one who is behind. Someone else is praised, and you become the one who is forgotten. Someone else is chosen, and you become the one who is always overlooked. This is how envy becomes anxiety. Because now, it's not just about what happened. It's about who you think you are. Buddhism would call this an attachment to a self-image, an identity built out of comparison. And the painful part is that it feels real, even though it's created in thought. It feels like truth, even though it's only a reaction. So the first transformation is simple, but it's not easy. You separate the feeling from the story. The feeling says, that matters to me. The story says, so I must be failing. The feeling is honest. The story is optional. Once you see this, you can work with envy without being owned by it. Now another layer appears. Sometimes envy is not about wanting what they have. Sometimes it is about wanting how they feel, their confidence, their freedom, their stability, their sense of direction. The thing you envy might not be the result. It might be the emotional experience you believe the result provides. This matters because it changes your next move. If you envy their money, you might chase money. But if you actually envy their peace, chasing money might not give you what you're looking for. If you envy their relationship, you might chase a partner. But if you actually envy their sense of being seen and valued, then the deeper work might be learning how to value yourself and choose healthier connections. So envy becomes clearer when you ask one honest question. What am I really jealous of right now? Not the surface answer. The deeper one. Sometimes you'll find that what you envy is not the object, but the permission. They gave themselves permission to try, permission to leave, permission to start over, permission to be visible, permission to take a risk, permission to believe in themselves. And your jealousy is really grief because you haven't given yourself that permission yet. That grief is important. It means there's a part of you that wants to live more fully. But envy gets even sharper when it mixes with shame. Because now the mind says, I want that, and then immediately says, but I shouldn't want that, or I don't deserve that, or I'm not the kind of person who gets that. That second voice is what turns desire into suffering. It turns hope into humiliation. This is where compassion becomes practical again, because compassion doesn't remove desire. It removes the self-hatred around desire. It lets you want something without punishing yourself for wanting it. Another reason envy hurts is because it makes time feel personal. You see someone else win, and it feels like life is skipping you, like the universe is choosing favorites, like your turn is being delayed on purpose. But that interpretation comes from the old habit of imagining life as a single line where everybody must be served in order. It's the same illusion you've been learning to release. In reality, other people's wins are not taking anything from you. Their success does not subtract your future, but the nervous system doesn't always understand logic in the moment. It understands threat. It senses, I may not get what I need, and that triggers anxiety. So part of transforming envy is calming the body, not just correcting the mind, because envy is not only an idea, it's a sensation. Tight chest, hot face, shallow breathing, restlessness, a sudden urge to scroll, to compare, to judge, to withdraw. If you try to fix it with mental arguments alone, it often stays stuck. A calmer body gives you access to clearer thinking, so instead of fighting envy, you slow down and notice it. You name it without drama. Envy is here. You feel it without feeding it. You breathe, not to make it go away instantly, but to stop it from taking over your whole identity. Then you get curious. Envy is pointing somewhere. Where? Maybe it's pointing to a dream you abandoned, a skill you stopped practicing, a lifestyle you told yourself was unrealistic, a version of you that still exists, quietly waiting for attention. This is where jealousy becomes a compass, not a cage. But a compass only helps if you choose a direction. So the next step is not to obsess over the person you envy. The next step is to translate the emotion into a personal truth. If their win triggered envy, it means something in you wants to grow, and growth doesn't require you to become them. Growth requires you to become more aligned with your own desires. This is a critical difference. Because envy often lies. It tells you that you want their exact life. But most of the time, you don't. You want what their life represents to your mind. You want the feeling you believe their life provides. You want the possibilities their life seems to open. When you chase their exact path, you may end up with achievements that still feel empty because they were never yours. So clarity means asking again, more deeply. If I could keep my own personality, my own values, my own rhythm, what would I build? That question dissolves imitation and reveals direction. Envy can also expose your standards. Sometimes you envy someone because they are living out a value you respect. Discipline, creativity, courage, social confidence, leadership, consistency. They became a mirror showing you what you admire and what you want to embody more fully. In that case, the transformation is powerful, because instead of resenting them, you can learn from them. Their win becomes proof that the value is possible in real life, not just in fantasy. They become evidence, not threat. But there's a hard truth here too. Sometimes envy appears because you're not honoring your own effort. You're working, but you're working with self-doubt. You're trying, but you're trying while insulting yourself. You're moving, but you're moving while believing you're late. And that internal violence makes every external win feel like a reminder of your inner war. So envy is also a signal to repair your relationship with your own progress. To recognize what you've done without dismissing it. To stop treating your growth like it doesn't count because it isn't loud. There's another part of this that almost no one talks about. The anxiety of watching others win is often amplified by the fear of being left behind socially. Not just behind in life, but behind in relevance, behind in belonging, behind in being seen. Because when others rise, the mind worries it will be forgotten. That fear is ancient. Humans survived through belonging. Being excluded felt like danger. So when you see others leveling up, the nervous system can interpret it as, I might be left out of the tribe. This is why envy can feel urgent. It feels like a threat to your place in the world. But Buddhism invites you to see that your worth does not come from being ahead. It comes from being awake, present, real, and no one can take that from you. So how do you actually transform envy into clarity? You stop moralizing it. You stop calling it bad. You stop using it as proof that you are small. Instead, you treat it like a message. This hurts because something matters to me. Then you refine the message. What exactly matters to me here? Then you translate it into direction. What can I do in my own life that aligns with this desire? Not everything at once, not a panic move, one honest step. Sometimes that step is internal, admitting the desire, letting yourself want something without shame, allowing yourself to start again without calling it late. Sometimes that step is practical, learning a skill, creating a routine, taking a small risk, having a difficult conversation, cleaning up a part of your life you keep avoiding. And sometimes that step is emotional, grieving the time you feel you lost without turning it into self-hatred. Forgiving yourself for not being ready earlier, releasing the fantasy that you had to be perfect to deserve progress. When envy becomes clarity, it loses its bitterness. It becomes clean, it becomes energy, it becomes a signpost. You no longer stare at other people's lives as if they are proof against you. You start using what you feel as insight about you. You stop asking, why them, and start asking, what is this showing me? And here is the quiet miracle. The moment you do that, you stop being powerless. Because envy becomes action, and action becomes self-respect. Not the loud kind that needs applause. The quiet kind that builds a life from the inside. You begin to see that other people's wins are not a wall. They are a window. They show what is possible in a human life. And the only real question left is not whether you are behind, but whether you are willing to listen to what your own heart has been trying to say through that sharp feeling. Because jealousy, when purified, is not about them. It's about the part of you that still wants to live. And when you finally honor that part, the anxiety starts to dissolve, the comparison fades, the heaviness lifts, and clarity arrives, not as a sudden miracle, but as a steady return to your own path. The win you were waiting for was never someone else losing. It was you finally understanding what you truly want, and having the courage to move toward it without shame. And once you begin to understand what your heart actually wants, something unexpected happens. The urgency starts to lose its grip. You no longer feel the same pressure to sprint just because others are running. You realize that chasing speed was never about reaching somewhere meaningful. It was about escaping the fear of being seen as slow. But when clarity replaces comparison, you start noticing how exhausted you've been from moving at a pace that was never yours. There is a quiet tension many people carry that has nothing to do with what they are doing and everything to do with how fast they think they should be doing it. Even rest feels guilty. Even progress feels insufficient. Even success feels delayed. It is like living with an invisible clock strapped to your chest, ticking louder whenever you pause, whenever you hesitate, whenever you breathe. This pressure creates a life that looks active but feels disconnected. You move quickly but without depth. You finish things but without satisfaction. You chase opportunities but without reflection. The faster you go, the less you understand where you are. Eventually, motion replaces meaning. Busyness replaces purpose. Buddhist wisdom speaks often about rhythm, though not always in those exact words. It points to the natural pacing found in everything that grows without force. A tree does not rush to produce fruit before its roots are strong. A river does not hurry toward the ocean, it follows the shape of the land. Seasons do not compete with each other, each one arrives when conditions allow it to exist fully. Human life is not separate from this pattern, but modern expectations try to override it. You are taught to compress years into months, to produce results before understanding, to decide before listening to yourself. Speed becomes a virtue, even when it leads to confusion, burnout, and mistakes that require even more time to repair. Rushing creates a paradox. You try to move faster to get ahead, but the haste reduces the quality of your decisions. You overlook details, ignore intuition, miss warning signs, say yes when you should pause, say no when you should explore. Then you spend extra time correcting what could have been prevented by patience. The time you thought you were saving ends up being lost in recovery. This pattern shows up everywhere. In careers where people jump into roles that do not suit them just to avoid feeling stagnant, then spend years trying to escape. In relationships where fear of loneliness leads to connections built on urgency instead of compatibility, creating emotional entanglements that take far longer to untangle than waiting would have. In personal growth, where rushing transformation leads to shallow change that collapses under stress. Moving at your natural speed does not mean moving slowly all the time. It means moving in alignment with your readiness. Sometimes your pace will be intense and focused. Other times it will be reflective and quiet. The key difference is that the movement feels grounded instead of forced. It comes from engagement rather than panic. Finding that rhythm requires listening inward, which can feel uncomfortable if you are used to external cues guiding you. Without comparison, deadlines, or pressure as reference points, you have to ask deeper questions. What actually energizes you? What drains you? When do you feel most clear? When do you feel scattered? What kind of work feels meaningful rather than merely urgent? Your body often knows your natural speed before your mind accepts it. Fatigue, irritability, and restlessness are signals that you are pushing beyond your sustainable pace. Calm focus, steady attention, and a sense of presence indicate alignment. Learning to trust these signals helps you adjust before burnout forces you to stop completely. There is also courage required to honor your rhythm in a world that rewards constant motion. Others may interpret your pacing as hesitation or lack of ambition. They may question your choices, offer unsolicited advice, or project their own fears onto you. Standing firm without becoming defensive is part of the practice. You do not need everyone to understand your timing for it to be valid. Returning to your own rhythm also reconnects you with depth. When you are not rushing, you notice subtleties that speed hides. You listen more carefully. You think more clearly. You respond instead of reacting. Conversations become more meaningful because you are present instead of mentally rushing to the next task. Creativity thrives in this slower awareness. Ideas need space to mature. Insights emerge when the mind is not crowded with urgency. Solutions appear when you allow time for patterns to reveal themselves. Many breakthroughs come not from pushing harder, but from stepping back long enough to see differently. There is also a healing aspect to moving at your natural speed. Trauma, disappointment, and exhaustion do not resolve on command. They require time to process. Rushing recovery often prolongs pain because unaddressed emotions resurface later. Patience allows integration, turning experience into wisdom instead of lingering tension. Relationships benefit from this pacing as well. Trust develops gradually. Emotional safety grows through consistency, not intensity. When you are not rushing connection, you give others space to reveal who they are over time. This prevents illusions built on early excitement from turning into later disillusionment. Another quiet gift of slowing down is accuracy. When you move with attention, you see more clearly what is actually happening, rather than what you fear or hope is happening. You make fewer assumptions. You ask better questions. You notice inconsistencies. This clarity prevents avoidable mistakes. There is also freedom in realizing that your path does not need to mirror anyone else's. Some people thrive in fast-paced environments, others excel in deliberate processes. Neither is superior. They are simply different expressions of how humans engage with life. Trying to adopt someone else's speed often disconnects you from your strengths. Over time, moving at your natural rhythm builds confidence that is not dependent on external validation. You trust your process because you see its results. Not always immediately, but consistently. Progress feels organic rather than forced. You stop worrying about whether you are late because you experience how alignment produces steadier growth than panic ever could. This approach also reduces the fear of missing out. When you are grounded in your timing, opportunities that are not meant for you lose their pull. You recognize that not every door is yours to enter. Some are distractions disguised as possibilities. Letting them pass does not feel like loss. It feels like clarity. The peace that comes from this way of living is subtle but profound. Your days feel less crowded, even if your responsibilities remain the same. Decisions feel lighter because they come from understanding rather than urgency. You sleep more deeply because your mind is not racing through unfinished comparisons. Eventually you realize that your life has always had a rhythm, even when you were ignoring it. Periods of acceleration followed by periods of reflection, times of outward action followed by times of inward growth. What once felt like inconsistency reveals itself as balance, and in that balance, the fear of being too slow dissolves. You see that speed without direction leads nowhere meaningful. You see that rushing through experiences prevents you from absorbing their lessons. You see that patience is not delay, but refinement. Moving at your natural speed does not guarantee an easy path, but it creates a sustainable one, a path where progress accumulates instead of collapsing under pressure, a path where you arrive at destinations with enough energy to actually enjoy them. The world may continue to move fast around you. Timelines will still exist. Comparisons will still appear, but they no longer dictate your pace. You walk with awareness instead of urgency, trusting that what is meant for you will meet you when you are ready to meet it fully. And in that trust, life stops feeling like a race you are losing and starts feeling like a journey you are finally present enough to experience. And as you settle into your own rhythm, a deeper realization begins to surface. Moving at your natural speed is not only about listening to yourself, it is also about questioning the voices that tried to set your pace in the first place, because the pressure to hurry did not appear out of nowhere. It was built slowly through expectations repeated so often that they started to feel like facts. Expectations about when you should fall in love, when you should succeed, when you should settle down, when you should have everything figured out. There is a silent timeline most people carry without ever consciously agreeing to it. It starts early, woven into casual conversations and subtle comparisons. At a certain age, you should be this. By another age, you should have that. If you reach a milestone too late, something must be wrong. If you reach it too early, something must be unusual. Either way, the message is clear. Your life is being measured against an invisible schedule. This social clock creates urgency even when there is no real reason to rush. You begin to interpret time as a threat instead of a medium through which life unfolds. Birthdays feel like deadlines. Anniversaries feel like checkpoints. Every passing year becomes evidence that you are either on track or falling behind, even though the criteria were never designed for your unique circumstances. Marriage is one of the most powerful examples of this pressure. People are told that love has an expiration window, that there is a right age to find a partner, a right age to commit, a right age to start a family. When your reality does not match this pattern, questions start appearing. Some are spoken out loud, others exist only in the looks people give you. You begin to feel as if your relationship status is a public concern rather than a personal journey. The result is that decisions about intimacy become driven by fear instead of connection. People rush into partnerships to silence doubt. They stay in situations that do not nourish them because leaving would mean starting over. Others avoid relationships entirely because they believe they are already late. In both cases, the timeline distorts genuine desire. Money carries its own version of the clock. Financial success is often presented as a race with early winners receiving admiration and late bloomers receiving skepticism. There is an expectation that stability should arrive by a certain stage, that wealth should accumulate in predictable increments, that setbacks indicate personal failure rather than economic complexity or life circumstance. This pressure can push people into careers that feel secure but hollow. It can also create chronic anxiety, even for those who are doing relatively well. No amount ever feels enough because there is always someone younger earning more, someone older with greater assets, someone who appears to have solved life's financial puzzle. Comparison turns money from a tool into a scoreboard. Career timelines function similarly. There is a belief that progress should follow a straight line, that promotions should occur in sequence, that changing direction signals instability. Yet modern life rarely follows these patterns. Industries shift, opportunities emerge unexpectedly, personal priorities evolve. The rigid timeline does not account for exploration, recovery, or reinvention. People who diverge from the expected path often internalize shame. They see themselves as late starters or lost wanderers, even when their experiences are building a foundation for something more aligned. The social clock does not recognize depth gained through detours. It only recognizes visible milestones. Age expectations intensify all of this because they create the illusion that possibilities narrow over time. Certain dreams become labeled as unrealistic past a certain point. Curiosity becomes replaced by caution. Society subtly encourages you to settle into roles that feel appropriate for your number of years rather than your actual vitality or interest. Buddhist thought challenges these assumptions by emphasizing impermanence and uniqueness. Every life unfolds through conditions that cannot be standardized. Birth circumstances, health, cultural context, opportunities, losses, relationships, all shape timing in ways no universal schedule can capture. When you compare yourself to a fixed timeline, you ignore these differences and impose a narrative that was never meant to apply to you. Detaching from social clocks does not mean rejecting structure entirely. It means recognizing the difference between guidance and imprisonment. Structure can help coordinate society, but it becomes harmful when it defines personal worth. You are not failing because your life does not resemble a template designed for convenience rather than authenticity. This detachment begins with awareness. Noticing how often your thoughts reference what you should have achieved by now. Observing how your mood shifts when conversations turn to milestones. Recognizing the subtle anxiety triggered by reminders of time passing. These reactions reveal how deeply the timeline has been internalized. Once you see it clearly, you can start questioning it. Who benefits from these expectations? Are they designed to support human well-being or to maintain social order? Are they based on current realities or outdated norms? Asking these questions loosens the authority the timeline once held over your decisions. Another important step is redefining progress in personal terms. Instead of measuring your life against collective standards, you identify what growth looks like for you. It may involve healing rather than accumulating, learning rather than settling, exploring rather than committing. These forms of progress are less visible but often more meaningful. There is also courage required to withstand misunderstanding. When you move outside conventional timing, others may project their fears onto you. They may worry that you will regret your choices or assume you lack direction. Remaining calm in the face of these reactions reinforces your autonomy. You do not need everyone's approval to live authentically. Detaching from social clocks also changes how you perceive others. You stop categorizing people by age-based expectations and start appreciating the diversity of their journeys. Someone starting over later in life no longer appears delayed, but brave. Someone choosing solitude no longer appears lonely, but intentional. This shift reduces judgment and increases empathy. Freedom from the timeline brings relief to the nervous system. Time stops feeling like an enemy. You experience your days as spaces for living rather than opportunities slipping away. Decisions become based on readiness and alignment rather than fear of running out. You also become more present in relationships. Without the pressure to reach milestones quickly, you allow connections to develop naturally. You appreciate the person in front of you rather than evaluating them as a potential solution to your timeline anxiety. This presence creates deeper intimacy. Creativity often flourishes in this freedom. When you are not rushing to prove something by a certain age, you experiment more. You take risks that feel meaningful rather than strategic. You allow projects to evolve instead of forcing them to meet arbitrary deadlines. This openness leads to work that reflects your true voice rather than external expectations. Another quiet transformation occurs in how you handle uncertainty. Without the social clock amplifying fear, you tolerate not knowing what comes next. You trust that direction will emerge through engagement rather than through adherence to a schedule. This trust reduces the need for constant reassurance. Over time, the internal prison dissolves. You still recognize time passing, but it no longer dictates your worth. You respect your own pace, your own priorities, your own season of life. The comparison fades because the framework that sustained it is no longer relevant. You begin to see that life was never meant to be synchronized. Some stories unfold early, others later. Some move quickly, others slowly. Some take unexpected turns that reveal possibilities invisible from the starting point. There is no single correct order, only individual sequences shaped by circumstance and choice. And in that understanding, the pressure to catch up disappears. You are no longer racing against an imaginary clock. You are participating in a life that unfolds according to its own rhythm, guided by awareness rather than fear. What once felt like being late now feels like arriving at your own time, not anyone else's. And after stepping outside the pressure of social clocks, another truth begins to surface, one that feels both comforting and unsettling at the same time. Just because your life does not look like it is advancing, does not mean it is not developing. The absence of visible progress does not equal the absence of growth. In fact, some of the most important transformations happen in complete silence, far away from recognition, far away from applause, far away from even your own awareness. There are seasons of life that feel strangely empty on the outside. No big achievements, no dramatic breakthroughs, no clear evidence that anything is changing. Days blur together, effort feels invisible. You start questioning whether you are wasting time, whether you missed your moment, whether you are simply not meant for something more. This is the emotional weight of unseen growth, and it can be heavier than failure because there is nothing tangible to respond to. The bamboo plant is often used as a symbol for this kind of development. For years after it is planted, nothing remarkable appears above the soil. Watering it feels almost foolish because the surface remains unchanged. But underground, an intricate network of roots is spreading, strengthening, preparing for the moment when rapid growth becomes possible. When it finally emerges, it rises with astonishing speed, not because it suddenly became capable, but because it was building quietly all along. Human lives follow a similar pattern, though it is harder to see because there is no clear boundary between preparation and emergence. Emotional maturity, resilience, clarity, skills, self-understanding, these grow beneath the surface. They develop through experiences that feel ordinary or even frustrating, conversations that seem insignificant, failures that feel pointless, waiting periods that feel like stagnation. The difficulty is that modern culture values visible progress above all else. Promotions, announcements, milestones, numbers, these are easy to display and easy to celebrate. Invisible growth receives little recognition, even though it often determines the quality of visible achievements later. This imbalance makes it easy to underestimate the importance of what is happening beneath the surface. During these quiet seasons, doubt becomes loud. You question your direction because there is no external feedback confirming you are on the right path. You compare your stillness to other people's motion and assume they are advancing while you are paused. But stillness can be fertile ground when used for integration rather than avoidance. Integration is the process of absorbing experience into wisdom. It takes time for lessons to settle, for emotions to process, for identity to adjust. If growth were always visible, it would also be fragile because it would lack depth. The underground phase ensures that what eventually emerges can withstand pressure. There is also a protective aspect to hidden development. When growth is not yet stable, exposure can disrupt it. Sharing ideas too early invites criticism that may discourage exploration. Taking on responsibilities before you are ready can create stress that damages confidence. Silence allows experimentation without the weight of expectations. This does not mean passivity. The underground phase is active in ways that are not immediately obvious. You are learning through observation, refining through practice, strengthening through repetition. Even rest contributes because it restores the energy needed for future effort. Nothing is wasted when approached with awareness. One reason these periods feel uncomfortable is that they require trust without evidence. You cannot point to achievements to reassure yourself. You must rely on an inner sense that something is forming, even if you cannot describe it yet. This trust grows stronger each time you experience delayed progress, followed by sudden clarity. Another challenge is resisting the urge to abandon the process prematurely. When results are slow, it is tempting to switch directions constantly, hoping for quicker feedback. But frequent changes prevent roots from deepening. Stability allows momentum to accumulate quietly until it becomes undeniable. Patience during invisible growth also cultivates humility. You learn that transformation does not always happen on your schedule. You become less attached to immediate validation and more focused on long-term alignment. This humility makes success easier to handle when it arrives, because you understand how much unseen effort preceded it. Relationships often deepen during these quieter seasons as well. Without the distraction of constant achievement chasing, you have more capacity to listen, to support, to connect authentically. These bonds become sources of strength later, when your life accelerates again and demands more energy. Creative breakthroughs frequently emerge from periods of apparent inactivity. The mind continues processing ideas in the background, connecting concepts in ways you cannot force consciously. When insight finally surfaces, it feels sudden, but it was prepared through countless unnoticed moments. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you accept the legitimacy of invisible growth. You stop measuring your worth by immediate output. You recognize that development has phases, each necessary for the next. This perspective reduces anxiety because you are no longer trying to rush a process that cannot be hurried. Over time, you start noticing subtle signs of change that were previously overlooked. Your reactions become calmer, your decisions become clearer. Situations that once overwhelmed you feel manageable. Conversations that once intimidated you feel natural. These shifts may not attract attention, but they signal profound internal restructuring. When the moment of visible emergence arrives, it often surprises even you. Opportunities appear that match the capabilities you have been quietly building. Challenges arise that you can now handle with confidence. Others may interpret your sudden progress as luck or overnight success, unaware of the years of preparation that made it possible. This sudden rise can feel disorienting if you are not prepared emotionally. You may struggle to reconcile the person you were during the quiet phase with the person you are becoming. Remembering the value of the underground period helps you stay grounded. It reminds you that growth is continuous, not a single leap. There is also responsibility that comes with visibility. When your life accelerates, you influence others through your example. Sharing your story honestly can help those who are still in their own hidden phases, reassuring them that silence does not equal failure. Eventually, you come to appreciate the rhythm between concealment and expression. Periods of building followed by periods of showing. Periods of learning followed by periods of teaching. Each cycle deepens your understanding of what it means to grow authentically. You begin to see that the quiet seasons were not interruptions, but essential foundations. Without them, success would feel hollow because it would not reflect true transformation. With them, achievement feels like a natural extension of who you have become. And perhaps the greatest gift of this wisdom is compassion for yourself during times when nothing seems to be happening. You no longer interpret stillness as stagnation. You recognize it as preparation. You treat yourself with patience rather than criticism. In this way, the bamboo becomes more than a metaphor. It becomes reassurance that life is not always meant to be visible, that development often requires darkness before it can reach light, that strength grows strongest when it is not performing for an audience. What once felt like delay now feels like incubation. What once felt like absence now feels like formation. And when growth finally breaks through the surface, it carries with it the stability of everything that happened quietly, unseen, but never wasted. And when growth finally rises above the surface, another fear often appears just as quietly as the last one faded. The fear that you started too late. That even though something is finally moving, Everyone else has already gone too far ahead. The moment you begin to show signs of progress, the mind whispers that it should have happened years ago, that you are a beginner in a world full of experts, that your timing makes your effort less valuable. There is a strange shame attached to being new at something as an adult. As children, beginners are expected to stumble, to experiment, to learn openly. But as you grow older, society subtly replaces curiosity with performance. You are expected to already know, already master, already be efficient. Starting from zero begins to feel embarrassing rather than natural. This is why so many people stay stuck, not because they lack desire, but because they fear the vulnerability of not being good yet. The beginner's mind is a concept that challenges this fear directly. It points to a way of seeing that is open, flexible, and free from the burden of needing to appear competent. When you approach something as a beginner, you allow yourself to explore without rigid expectations. You are not defending a reputation. You are not protecting an identity. You are simply engaging with the experience as it unfolds. This openness creates a kind of intelligence that experience alone cannot provide. Experts sometimes become trapped by what they think they already know. Their knowledge turns into assumptions. Their methods become habits. They stop noticing new possibilities because they are filtering everything through familiar patterns. Freshness, on the other hand, sees details that routine overlooks. Starting late can actually be an advantage because you bring perspective that earlier starters did not have. You have lived through different challenges, learned lessons that shape your priorities, developed resilience that protects you from discouragement. Your motivation may be clearer because it is not driven by external pressure, but by genuine interest. There is also freedom in beginning without the weight of expectation. You are not trying to prove anything. You are not competing with your past self. You are not locked into a path chosen before you understood yourself fully. This freedom allows experimentation without fear of ruining a carefully constructed image. Ego is what makes starting feel dangerous. It tells you that your worth depends on being impressive. It says that mistakes will expose you as inadequate. It warns that others will judge you for not knowing what they know. When ego dominates, learning becomes threatening because every failure feels like a public verdict on your value. Releasing ego does not mean abandoning standards. It means separating your identity from your performance. You can strive for excellence while accepting that growth includes awkward stages. You can take pride in effort rather than only in results. This shift transforms mistakes from evidence of weakness into evidence of engagement. Curiosity becomes your guide instead of comparison. You focus on what you are discovering rather than how you appear. This makes learning enjoyable rather than stressful. Progress feels natural because it is driven by interest instead of fear. Another gift of the beginner's mind is adaptability. Without rigid expectations, you respond to feedback more easily. You adjust methods without feeling threatened. You absorb information quickly because you are not defending old habits. This flexibility can accelerate growth beyond what long-term experience sometimes allows. People who start later often bring interdisciplinary insights as well. Skills from previous experiences transfer in unexpected ways. A person beginning a creative pursuit after years in a technical field may approach problems differently, leading to innovative solutions. Life does not waste experience, it repurposes it. There is also humility in starting late, and humility opens doors that arrogance closes. When you acknowledge that you are learning, others become more willing to support you. Mentors appear. Communities welcome you. Conversations deepen because you are genuinely listening rather than trying to impress. Shame dissolves when you realize that everyone is a beginner at something. Even those who seem accomplished are navigating areas where they feel uncertain. Expertise is always relative. The moment you step into a new domain, you are starting again, regardless of age or status. Time itself becomes less intimidating when you adopt this mindset. Instead of calculating how long it will take to catch up, you focus on how meaningful the process feels. The journey becomes valuable in its own right, not just as a means to an endpoint. There is also healing in giving yourself permission to restart. It challenges the belief that life must follow a single, uninterrupted trajectory. It affirms that growth is not confined to youth, that reinvention is possible at any stage. This realization brings hope, not as fantasy, but as practical reality. Fear of judgment often fades when you recognize that most people are too focused on their own insecurities to scrutinize yours. Those who do judge usually reveal more about their own fears than about your efforts. Your willingness to begin can even inspire others to reconsider their own limitations. The beginner's mind also reconnects you with wonder. Familiarity can dull appreciation, but newness restores it. Simple achievements feel exciting. Small improvements feel meaningful. You notice details that experienced practitioners take for granted. This sense of discovery adds vitality to your life. Over time, confidence grows not from pretending to know everything, but from proving to yourself that you can learn. Each step forward reinforces your capacity for change. You become less afraid of future beginnings because you trust your ability to navigate them. This mindset reshapes your relationship with age as well. Instead of seeing it as a barrier, you see it as context. Your years become a resource rather than a limitation. You bring patience, perspective, and emotional intelligence that younger versions of yourself lacked. There is also relief in letting go of the need to be impressive. Performance is exhausting because it requires constant monitoring of how you are perceived. Authentic engagement is energizing because it focuses on the experience itself. You move from trying to look capable to actually becoming capable. Eventually, you may find that starting late was exactly what allowed you to approach the path with clarity. If you had begun earlier, you might have followed trends rather than intuition. You might have pursued goals that no longer resonate with who you are now. Your timing aligns with your readiness. The liberation of the beginner's mind is not just about learning new skills. It is about reclaiming the right to grow without apology. It is about understanding that life is not a fixed script, but an evolving story, open to revision as long as you are willing to participate. What once felt like delay transforms into opportunity. You are not late, you are present. You are awake to the possibilities that exist now, not trapped in expectations from the past. And in that presence, something shifts. The fear of starting disappears, replaced by quiet excitement. Not because you are certain of the outcome, but because you trust the process of becoming. You realize that freshness can cut through complexity in ways experience sometimes cannot. That openness can reveal paths hidden from those who assume they have already seen everything. That humility can create strength stronger than pride. Starting late without shame becomes an act of freedom. A declaration that your life belongs to you, not to a timeline, not to expectations, not to the imagined judgment of others. And as you step forward with that freedom, the question is no longer why you didn't begin sooner. The question becomes how far you can go now that you finally have. And as you step into the freedom of beginning without shame, another layer of pressure starts to loosen. You realize that much of your urgency was never about your goals themselves. It was about how your life would look to other people. The fear of being seen as ordinary, the fear of not being admired, the fear of disappearing into the background. Once that begins to fade, something surprising happens. The weight of being behind starts to dissolve on its own. There is a silent performance many people carry from the moment they become aware of how they are perceived. It is not always obvious. It does not always involve dramatic displays. Sometimes it is as subtle as choosing a career that sounds respectable rather than one that feels meaningful. Sometimes it is staying in a relationship that looks stable even when it feels empty. Sometimes it is pretending to be confident while quietly feeling lost. Living for an audience changes the texture of your decisions. You stop asking what feels true and start asking what will look impressive. You measure success by visibility instead of fulfillment. You become skilled at presenting a version of yourself that fits expectations, but the more polished the performance becomes, the more distant you feel from your real experience. This performance is exhausting because it never ends. There is always someone new to impress, someone whose approval you have not yet secured, someone whose opinion suddenly feels important. Social media amplifies this dynamic by turning everyday life into a display. Achievements become announcements, experiences become content, even struggles become narratives shaped for consumption. When you live this way, feeling behind is almost inevitable. You are comparing your private reality to other people's curated highlights while also curating your own. You lose track of what is actually happening because you are constantly adjusting your presentation. The scoreboard never resets because it was never real to begin with. Releasing the need to be impressive is not about rejecting ambition, it is about reclaiming authenticity. It means choosing actions because they matter to you, not because they will be admired. It means allowing yourself to be ordinary in moments where performance once felt mandatory. Ordinary does not mean insignificant. It means grounded. It means present. It means engaged with life as it is rather than as it appears. When you stop performing, you notice details you used to overlook. Conversations feel deeper because you are not monitoring how you sound. Work feels more satisfying because you are focused on the process rather than the recognition. There is also relief in no longer needing to maintain an image. You can admit uncertainty without feeling exposed. You can change direction without explaining yourself to everyone. You can rest without guilt because you are not worried about falling behind in someone else's narrative. Living without an audience reconnects you with intrinsic motivation. This is the drive that comes from interest, curiosity, or meaning rather than external reward. It is more sustainable because it does not depend on applause. When you are guided by intrinsic motivation, progress feels natural. You continue because you want to, not because you feel watched. Relationships become more genuine in this space as well. Without the pressure to impress, you allow others to see your real thoughts and emotions. This vulnerability invites deeper connection because it signals trust. People respond to authenticity more than perfection, even if they do not always articulate it. Another unexpected effect is that creativity expands. Performance tends to follow formulas that have worked before. Authentic exploration leads to originality because it is not constrained by expectations. You take risks you would have avoided if approval were the main goal. Some of those risks fail, but others lead to breakthroughs that could not have been predicted. The fear of judgment often diminishes once you realize how little attention most people are actually paying. Everyone is busy managing their own insecurities. The imagined audience is much larger than the real one. This realization frees energy that was previously spent on self-monitoring. There is also a shift in how you interpret success. Instead of asking how impressive an achievement appears, you ask how aligned it feels. Did it bring satisfaction? Did it reflect your values? Did it contribute to your growth? These questions create a more stable sense of accomplishment because they are not dependent on external validation. Living without an audience also reduces the fear of failure. Mistakes become private lessons rather than public embarrassments. You recover faster because you are not dealing with the added weight of perceived humiliation. Learning becomes more efficient because it is not filtered through shame. You may notice that time feels different as well. Without the constant pressure to produce visible results, days feel less rushed. You move through tasks with attention instead of urgency. This slower awareness often improves quality because you are fully engaged with what you are doing. There is also courage in choosing authenticity over approval. It means accepting that some people may not understand your choices. They may question your priorities or interpret your quietness as lack of ambition. Remaining calm in the face of misunderstanding reinforces your independence. Over time, the desire to impress fades not because you suppress it, but because it becomes irrelevant. You discover that fulfillment does not come from being admired. It comes from living in a way that feels honest. The admiration of others may still arrive, but it is no longer the reason you act. Feeling behind disappears in this state because comparison loses its fuel. Without an audience, there is no stage, no competition, no ranking. There is only your experience unfolding at its own pace. You measure progress by depth rather than by speed. This freedom also makes it easier to celebrate others without insecurity. Their success does not threaten your identity because your worth is no longer tied to outperforming anyone. You can appreciate their journey while staying grounded in your own. Another subtle transformation occurs in how you experience solitude. Instead of feeling lonely without constant feedback, you begin to enjoy the quiet. It becomes a space where you can think clearly, reflect, and reconnect with yourself. Solitude becomes restorative rather than uncomfortable. The absence of performance reveals how much energy was previously tied up in maintaining appearances. That energy becomes available for growth, for creativity, for relationships, for rest. Life feels lighter, not because circumstances changed, but because you stopped carrying an invisible script. Eventually, authenticity becomes effortless. You no longer need to remind yourself to be real because there is nothing to protect. Your actions align naturally with your values. Your voice sounds like your own. Your presence feels grounded, and in that grounded state, something remarkable happens. The fear of being behind dissolves completely. You are not racing anyone. You are not performing for anyone. You are simply living. Living becomes enough, not in a passive sense, but in a deeply engaged one. You pursue what matters because it matters, not because it will be noticed. You rest when you need to, because your well-being is part of your purpose, not an obstacle to it. This is the quiet liberation of releasing the need to be impressive. You step off the stage you never agreed to stand on. You walk into a life that belongs to you, unscripted, unranked, unobserved except by those who truly care. And in that space, progress feels natural, peace feels possible, and the question of whether you are ahead or behind fades into something far less urgent than simply being present for the life you are finally free to live. And when you finally step off the stage and stop performing for approval, the silence that follows can feel both peaceful and unsettling. Without the noise of comparison and expectation, your attention turns inward, and there it is, waiting for you. The past, not as a distant memory, but as a collection of moments that suddenly feel heavy. Choices you question, opportunities you let pass. Years that seem blurred together without clear direction. When there is no audience left to distract you, you are left face to face with the question that hurts the most. What if I wasted time I can never get back? There is a specific kind of pain that comes from looking backward with the knowledge you did not have then. It creates a cruel illusion that you should have known better, acted faster, chosen differently. The mind reconstructs history as if clarity was always available, ignoring how uncertain everything felt in the moment. This hindsight turns ordinary human limitation into what feels like permanent failure. The fear of wasted years is not really about time. It is about meaning. It is the fear that parts of your life did not count, that effort was misplaced, that suffering produced nothing valuable. It makes you question whether you are allowed to move forward without first solving the past. It can trap you in cycles of rumination, replaying scenes in search of a different ending that will never come. Regret is complicated because it contains both wisdom and self-punishment. The wisdom says you see more clearly now. The punishment says you should have seen clearly sooner. Healing begins when you separate those two voices. One is guiding you forward, the other is keeping you stuck. Buddhist teaching often points to the idea that suffering intensifies when we resist reality as it is. The past cannot be altered, but the meaning you assign to it can shift dramatically. When you interpret your history as evidence against you, every memory becomes a weight. When you interpret it as preparation, even painful experiences become sources of insight. Turning the past into fertilizer is not about pretending everything was beneficial. Some experiences were harmful. Some choices did create consequences. Acknowledging responsibility is part of the process because it restores your sense of agency. Without responsibility, you become a victim of circumstance. With responsibility, you become a participant in your own evolution. Responsibility does not require self-condemnation. It requires honesty. You recognize where fear influenced your decisions, where you avoided discomfort, where you stayed longer than you should have, where you left too soon. This clarity is not meant to shame you. It is meant to show you how you operate so you can choose differently now. Many people fear that forgiving themselves will erase accountability. In reality, the opposite is true. When you are not drowning in guilt, you can look at your actions more objectively. You can understand the patterns that shaped them. You can develop compassion for the version of you that was doing the best it could with limited awareness. Time that feels wasted often contains invisible growth. Skills learned indirectly. Emotional resilience developed through hardship. Boundaries formed after betrayal. Clarity about what you do not want. These gains may not have been intentional, but they influence your present choices profoundly. There is also the reality that not every period of life is meant for visible achievement. Some years are for survival, some are for healing, some are for exploration without direction. Judging these phases by productivity alone misses their purpose. They were stabilizing you in ways you could not see at the time. Comparisons intensify regret because they create the illusion that others used their time perfectly while you did not. But you rarely see the full story of someone else's journey. Their struggles, doubts, and detours remain hidden. You compare your internal experience to their external presentation and conclude that you are uniquely flawed. Healing regret involves restoring context, remembering what you were facing, what resources you had, what emotional state you were in. Decisions that look irrational now may have felt like the safest option then. Understanding this reduces harsh judgment and replaces it with empathy. Another important step is recognizing that growth is non-linear. Progress often requires revisiting similar lessons in different forms until they are fully integrated. What feels like repetition may actually be refinement. You were not stuck. You were deepening your understanding. There is also courage in accepting that some losses cannot be repaired. Relationships that ended, opportunities that closed, paths that diverged permanently. Acceptance does not erase sadness, but it prevents it from turning into bitterness. It allows grief to move through you instead of freezing into resentment. Turning the past into fertilizer means using its lessons to nourish your present. You apply what you learn to current decisions. You avoid patterns that once caused harm. You pursue directions that align with your evolved values. This transforms regret from a deadweight into living wisdom. Self-compassion plays a crucial role here. Speaking to yourself with the same understanding you would offer a friend softens the intensity of regret. You acknowledge pain without amplifying it. You recognize effort even when outcomes were disappointing. There is also value in taking small corrective actions where possible. Apologizing if you hurt someone, reconnecting if a relationship mattered, learning a skill you once postponed. These actions do not rewrite history, but they create continuity between who you were and who you are becoming. Mindfulness helps prevent the past from dominating the present. By returning attention to what is happening now, you interrupt the cycle of rumination. You remind yourself that life is still unfolding, that opportunities still exist, that you are not confined to earlier chapters. Over time, you may notice that your relationship with memory changes. Instead of sharp edges, memories feel softer. Instead of accusations, they feel like stories that shaped you. You can revisit them without being overwhelmed because they no longer define your identity. Gratitude sometimes emerges unexpectedly in this process, not for the pain itself, but for the perspective it provided. You see how it prepared you to appreciate stability, kindness, or clarity when they appear. Without those experiences, you might have overlooked what truly matters. Forgiveness, both for yourself and others, completes the transformation. It releases the emotional charge tied to the past. It allows you to move forward without dragging unresolved resentment behind you. Forgiveness is not approval of what happened. It is freedom from being controlled by it. As regret loosens its hold, energy returns to the present. You become more engaged with current opportunities because you are no longer trapped in analysis of what cannot be changed. Creativity increases because mental space is no longer occupied by repetitive thoughts. You begin to trust that life can still hold meaning regardless of how it started. That purpose is not determined by a perfect past, but by conscious participation now. This trust makes the future feel open instead of predetermined by earlier mistakes. Eventually, the fear of wasted years dissolves into a quieter understanding. Nothing that shaped you is entirely useless. Even the painful parts contributed to the depth you carry. Even the detours expanded your perspective. Even the confusion clarified what you value. The past becomes soil rather than shadow, something that supports growth instead of blocking light. You carry its lessons without carrying its weight, and in that shift you realize that time was never truly wasted. It was lived, felt, struggled through, learned from. It was part of the long process of becoming someone capable of seeing clearly now. What once felt like evidence against you becomes proof that you endured, adapted, and are still here, ready to use everything you have learned to shape what comes next. And once the past stops feeling like evidence against you, a new question quietly takes its place. If you no longer have to punish yourself for what has been, how do you move forward without falling back into pressure? How do you grow without turning progress into another form of stress? Many people swing between two extremes. They either chase improvement with urgency that drains them, or they retreat into comfort that slowly numbs them. Finding the balance between acceptance and effort becomes the next challenge, the one that determines whether peace can coexist with ambition. A calm realization begins to form. You do not have to choose between being at peace and wanting more from life. The tension you felt before came from believing that contentment meant settling and striving meant dissatisfaction. But there is a middle path where you can appreciate what exists while still nurturing what could be. This path removes the frantic energy from growth and replaces it with steady intention. Contentment in this sense is not passive. It is an active recognition that your worth is not dependent on future outcomes. You are allowed to breathe before you achieve the next thing. You are allowed to feel grounded even while working toward change. This grounding stabilizes your motivation because it is no longer fueled by fear of inadequacy. Pressure distorts progress by making every step feel like a test of your value. When pressure dominates, mistakes feel catastrophic, delays feel unacceptable, and rest feels like failure. This environment is unsustainable because it turns growth into survival. You are not expanding, you are defending yourself from imagined consequences. Acceptance softens this dynamic. It allows you to acknowledge where you are without resistance. Acceptance does not mean approval of stagnation. It means clarity. When you see your situation honestly, without exaggeration or denial, you can respond effectively. You stop wasting energy, wishing reality were different, and start working with what is actually present. Intentional effort then becomes focused rather than frantic. You choose actions that align with your priorities instead of reacting to anxiety. Your pace becomes consistent because it is based on commitment rather than bursts of urgency followed by exhaustion. This approach also changes how you interpret setbacks. Instead of viewing them as proof that you are failing, you see them as feedback, information about what needs adjustment. This perspective keeps you engaged because you are not discouraged by imperfection. You expect learning curves and adapt accordingly. There is also a quiet confidence that develops when you trust gradual progress. You no longer need dramatic transformations to feel hopeful. Small improvements accumulate over time, creating momentum that feels stable rather than volatile. This stability reduces the temptation to abandon your path when results are not immediate. Another important aspect is learning to rest without guilt. Rest is often misunderstood as the opposite of productivity, but in reality, it is part of sustainable effort. Recovery allows insight to deepen, creativity to return, and motivation to renew. Without rest, progress becomes brittle and eventually collapses. Contentment also protects you from the endless cycle of comparison. When you appreciate what you have, you are less vulnerable to feeling diminished by what others display. Your focus returns to your own experience, which is the only place where meaningful change can occur. There is humility in this process as well. You recognize that you cannot control every outcome. External factors, timing and chance, all play roles in how life unfolds. Accepting this uncertainty reduces frustration because you stop demanding guarantees. You do your part and release the rest. This release is not indifference. It is trust. Trust that effort matters even when results are delayed. Trust that direction is more important than speed. Trust that consistency will eventually produce change even if the timeline is unclear. The balance between acceptance and effort also improves decision-making. When you are not panicking, you evaluate options more clearly. You choose paths based on long-term alignment rather than short-term relief. This reduces the likelihood of impulsive choices that create new problems. Relationships benefit from this mindset too. You become less reactive because your sense of worth is not constantly under threat. You listen more patiently. You communicate more thoughtfully. You allow others space to grow at their own pace because you are no longer projecting urgency onto them. Another transformation occurs in how you experience success. Instead of feeling brief satisfaction followed by immediate pressure to achieve the next thing, you allow yourself to fully absorb the moment. You acknowledge effort, appreciate progress, and then move forward without anxiety. Failure, when it happens, feels less personal. It becomes an event rather than an identity. You analyze what happened, extract lessons, and continue. This resilience comes from knowing that your value does not fluctuate with outcomes. There is also creativity in this balanced state. Without the fear of wasting time, you explore ideas more freely. You experiment without the need for immediate validation. Some experiments lead nowhere, but others open doors you would not have discovered under rigid pressure. Your relationship with time changes as well. Instead of racing against it, you collaborate with it. You understand that some processes cannot be accelerated without compromising their integrity. Growth, healing, learning, and trust all unfold at their own pace. Contentment brings attention back to the present moment, where action actually occurs. Anxiety pulls you into the future, regret pulls you into the past, but balanced awareness keeps you engaged with what you can influence now. This presence improves the quality of your efforts. There is also compassion in recognizing that everyone struggles with this balance. You become less judgmental of others because you see your own challenges reflected in them. This empathy strengthens connections and reduces isolation. Over time, the distinction between progress and peace begins to fade. They are no longer opposing forces, but complementary ones. Peace provides the foundation that makes progress sustainable. Progress provides the sense of direction that keeps peace from becoming stagnation. You may notice that motivation feels quieter but stronger. It is not driven by urgency or fear, but by clarity. You know why you are moving, and that purpose sustains you even when excitement fluctuates. Gratitude becomes easier to access in this state because you are not constantly focused on what is missing. You recognize what is working, what is stable, what is supportive. This appreciation reinforces resilience during difficult periods. There is also courage in choosing this path because it goes against cultural narratives that glorify constant hustle. Slowing down enough to move intentionally can feel risky in a world that equates speed with success. Trusting your own rhythm requires confidence in your judgment. Eventually, you realize that contentment without complacency is not a static achievement, but a practice. It requires ongoing awareness, gentle correction when you drift toward extremes, and patience with yourself when you lose balance. This practice transforms growth into something sustainable. You are no longer sprinting toward an undefined finish line. You are walking a path that evolves as you do, adjusting pace when needed, pausing when necessary, continuing when ready. And in that steady movement, something profound emerges. Progress no longer feels like a burden you must carry. It feels like a natural expression of being alive. You are not forcing change, you are participating in it. The pressure to become someone else dissolves because you are fully engaged in becoming yourself. Not a perfected version, not a completed version, but a living process that unfolds with awareness. Peace and effort coexist without conflict. Acceptance and ambition support each other instead of competing. You move forward without losing yourself, and you rest without losing direction. This is the quiet strength of contentment without complacency. Growth that does not demand your exhaustion. Progress that does not require your anxiety. A life that expands gently, steadily, and authentically, guided not by pressure, but by clarity. And when progress no longer feels forced, another uncertainty quietly appears in the space that pressure once occupied. Without urgency pushing you forward, you begin to notice how much of life unfolds without guarantees. You can move with intention, stay patient, remain grounded, and still not see clear results for a long time. This is where many people lose trust, not because they are weak, but because they were taught that effort should produce immediate proof. When proof does not arrive, doubt starts whispering that nothing is working, that maybe you are walking in the wrong direction, that maybe there is no path at all. There is a specific discomfort that comes from continuing without evidence. It feels like stepping forward in fog, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. Your mind searches for signs that you are not wasting energy, something measurable, something visible, something that confirms you are getting closer to where you hope to be. When those signs are absent, fear tries to fill the silence with worst-case scenarios. This fear is deeply human because survival once depended on certainty. Knowing where food was, where danger was, where shelter was. Modern life asks you to operate in a different environment, one where the most important journeys are internal and cannot be mapped in advance. Personal growth, healing, purpose, wisdom, these do not follow predictable timelines. They develop quietly, often below the surface, long before they become visible. Trusting the unseen path begins with accepting that clarity often comes after movement, not before it. You rarely feel completely ready when you start something meaningful. Readiness grows as you engage, as you adapt, as you learn through experience. Waiting for certainty can become a subtle form of avoidance, a way to delay discomfort indefinitely. Movement itself creates information. Each step reveals something about the terrain, about your strengths, about your limits, about what needs adjustment. Even missteps contribute because they narrow the range of unknowns. Standing still, on the other hand, keeps everything theoretical. Fear expands in that empty space because nothing challenges it. Faith in movement is not blind optimism. It is a grounded belief that action has value even when outcomes are unclear. You trust that engaging with life is better than retreating from it, that participation shapes you in ways observation cannot. This belief turns effort into exploration rather than risk. There is also humility in admitting that you cannot control every variable. Outcomes depend on factors beyond your influence, including timing, other people's choices, and circumstances you cannot predict. Accepting this reduces frustration because you stop interpreting delays as personal failure. Patience becomes an active skill here. Not the passive waiting that feels like stagnation, but the steady continuation of effort without constant reassurance. You hold your direction lightly, adjusting when necessary, but not abandoning it at the first sign of uncertainty. Silence plays a role in this process as well. Without constant noise from external opinions, you become more attuned to subtle internal signals. Intuition, which is often drowned out by urgency, begins to surface. You notice what energizes you, what drains you, what feels aligned, what feels forced. There is courage in continuing without applause. When results are not visible, recognition is absent. You must generate your own motivation, your own encouragement, your own validation. This independence strengthens resilience because your drive no longer depends on external feedback. Over time, you may notice small shifts that were invisible before: a calmer response to stress, a clearer sense of boundaries, a deeper understanding of your priorities. These internal changes are signs that movement is working even if external circumstances remain unchanged. Trust also grows when you reflect on past experiences where uncertainty eventually resolved into clarity. Moments when you felt lost, but later recognized that the confusion was part of the transition. Remembering these patterns reinforces confidence that the current fog will also lift. Comparison can disrupt this trust because it suggests that others have clearer paths. But you rarely see their doubts, their detours, their private struggles. Every journey contains uncertainty, even if it is hidden behind confident appearances. Letting go of the need for immediate evidence frees creativity. You experiment without fear of wasting effort because you understand that exploration itself is valuable. Some attempts will fail, but each one expands your understanding of what is possible. There is also a shift in how you define progress. Instead of looking for dramatic breakthroughs, you appreciate subtle improvements. Consistency becomes more important than intensity. You focus on showing up rather than proving something. Your relationship with doubt changes as well. Instead of seeing it as an enemy, you treat it as a signal to pause and reflect without abandoning your direction. Doubt can refine your approach without dictating your decisions. The present moment becomes your anchor. When the future feels uncertain, returning attention to what you can do today reduces overwhelm. Small actions accumulate, creating a sense of continuity that counters feelings of stagnation. There is peace in accepting that not everything meaningful is immediately measurable. Some transformations are qualitative rather than quantitative. They affect how you experience life rather than what you achieve externally. Trusting the path also involves releasing the illusion that there is only one correct route. There are many ways to grow, many ways to contribute, many ways to live meaningfully. Flexibility allows you to adapt when circumstances shift without feeling lost. Support from others can help, but it cannot replace your own commitment. People may encourage you, but they cannot walk your path for you. Recognizing this responsibility strengthens your autonomy. Gratitude can coexist with uncertainty. Appreciating what is stable while acknowledging what is unknown creates emotional balance. You are not ignoring challenges, but you are not consumed by them either. There is also beauty in the mystery of not knowing exactly where you will end up. It keeps life dynamic, open to surprise, resistant to stagnation. Predictability can feel safe, but it can also limit possibility. As trust deepens, fear loses its dominance. It may still appear, but it no longer dictates your choices. You recognize it as a natural response, rather than a command you must obey. Movement becomes a form of meditation. Each step taken with awareness reinforces your connection to the present. You are not rushing toward an imagined destination. You are participating in the unfolding of your own life. Eventually, you realize that the path was never something separate from you. It is created through your decisions, your responses, your willingness to continue. There was no hidden map you failed to find. There was only the act of walking. Faith shifts from belief in specific outcomes to trust in your capacity to navigate whatever arises. You become less concerned with where you will arrive and more confident in your ability to adapt along the way. This confidence is quiet, not dramatic. It does not demand certainty. It coexists with ambiguity, grounded in the knowledge that you have endured uncertainty before and can do so again. And in that quiet confidence, the need for constant proof fades. You move because movement itself feels true. You continue because stopping would disconnect you from the life you are meant to experience. The fog does not need to disappear for you to take the next step. The absence of evidence does not mean absence of progress. The unseen path is still a path, shaped by each decision to keep going. What once felt like walking blindly begins to feel like walking faithfully. Not faith in guarantees, but faith in participation, in growth, in the unfolding process that reveals itself only to those willing to stay in motion. And as you keep moving, gently, steadily, without forcing certainty, you discover something unexpected. The path you could not see was never meant to be seen all at once. It was meant to be lived, step by step, until what once felt invisible becomes the ground beneath your feet. If there is one truth to carry with you after all of this, it is this: you were never behind. You were just measuring your life with a ruler that was never made for you. Your path was not late, not broken, not wasted. It was unfolding in ways that could only be understood once you slowed down enough to see it. Every detour shaped you. Every delay protected you. Every quiet season was building something that noise would have destroyed. Patience was never punishment. It was preparation. So if today feels heavy, if the pressure to catch up is still whispering in your mind, remember this moment. You don't have to outrun life to live it. You don't have to prove your worth with speed. You only have to keep walking with awareness, with compassion for yourself, and with trust that growth does not disappear just because it is invisible. If this message found you at the right time, leave a comment that says, "I trust my timing." Not for me, but as a promise to yourself. Words have power, especially the ones you choose to believe. And if you want more calm in a world that keeps trying to rush you, subscribe to the channel and stay close. There is a different way to live, and you don't have to discover it alone.